Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Tuesday, August 5th, 2014. This is a live broadcast. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me is my co-host, my son, fellow researcher, investigator, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report, folks, sharing for 3 hours of just an incredible program. Tonight, as the program unfolds, our number one update on news information that you need to know about, the most current information about important events all across the United States and all across the globe. Hours 2 and 3. Very special appearance by Mr. Stan Deyo, standeyo.com, a friend of the program, a good friend of ours. Of course, he just back from the Pikes Peak conference, where he gave a presentation about the Garden of Eden, essentially confirming not only history, but biblical history, and we're excited to get his take, get his findings on that. Those 2 hours, folks, I believe will be really one of the most important 2 hours of radio, so please stay tuned for that. For new listeners, our time that we broadcast is 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us right here on BTR. We're also simulcast, thank you, Troy, by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There, we can be heard at thehagmanandhagmannreport.com. Now, although our home base is homelandsecurityus.com, I'd like to direct everyone's attention to hagmanandhagmann.com. That's very simple, hagmanandhagmann.com. We've got that website populated with the last month's show summaries. We've got up-to-date show summaries, and also a single click to SoundCloud. If you want to listen via SoundCloud, you can do it there, and of course via BTR and other avenues as well. I want to welcome you. I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you for your belief and trust in us. Many thanks to the various people who sent emails over the last 12 to actually 24 hours. Thank you so much for your kind words and your uplifting words. Joe, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here tonight. We're going to have a fantastic program, as Stan Deyo will be back, and with his news, as you reported, from the conference, what he talked about at the Prophecy and the News Conference and at Pikes Peak. He'll be talking about some of that here. And also, I want to send a special thank you to Greg Jackson. His book is available for pre-order at Amazon, and I would urge everybody who can purchase this book, 40 Things to Teach Your Children Before You Die, to pre-order it on the Amazon website. And I'm going to read the introduction today, and Greg's asked us if we wanted to read part of we could read the book, one chapter a night. The chapters are very short, and there are quite a few, though. But in the introduction, it says, one of my greatest burdens and desires as a father is for my 8-year-old son to grow up honoring God with his life, knowing right from wrong, and acting on that knowledge. I am far more interested in his character than I am in which college he attends or his profession. I am sure that I am not alone. In fact, if you are reading these words, you too must possess that same burden and sense of obligation that I do to pass on the same truths that have guided the best parts of your life to your children, so that they may know the truth and that their lives will glorify God. During most of American history, when a biblical worldview prevailed, much of the information in this book was common knowledge, even among non-Christians. But we live in a day where good has become evil, and evil good, where everyone does what is right in his own eyes, in a time when quoting God's word in public can literally get you arrested for a hate crime. And that is precisely why I am writing this book, to arm you, the parent, with what I believe to be among the most important biblical truths that can pass on to the next generation, the stuff that they are never going to learn in most of the schools or from the media, and sadly, in many churches. These are types of things they must understand and apply if they have any hope of living a life of faith in an increasingly dark culture and spiritual climate. The most important truths that I would share with my son if I were on my deathbed. My sincere hope and prayer is that Christian parents share this politically incorrect book with their children so that the next generation may be adequately prepared to defend biblical truth for the advancement of the gospel and biblical truth in general, the only real antidote for what really ails America and the rest of the world. In Jesus' name, Greg Jackson. And that's the introduction of his book. Chapter 1 is Seek First the Kingdom, which we will read at a later date. And once again, Greg, thank you for sending me the copy of your book. The title, again, is 40 Things to Tell Your Children Before You Die. You can find it on Amazon, and it's a pre-order. We want to get this book to the top of the list and see it on other sites, Barnes & Noble's.
New York Times bestseller list, because I got to tell you, folks, that drives the socialist Democrats crazy, the progressives crazy, with a book like this. By us pushing the numbers, it just drives them absolutely. I can tell you, boy, the blowback that comes from that, Joe, is just amazing. So we like to push the biblical truth out to the people, and I'm just going to tell you right now, it'll be fun to watch the people that have to put this book up, squirm and oh my goodness, can't do it. This, of course, in the wake of the Special Olympics ceremony. I just want to comment on this before we get into the news. I had referenced this earlier. Katy Perry, the witch, if you will, self-proclaimed witch, Dark Horse, her album, playing with the Special Olympics at the White House. The more we get involved, Joe, with respect to who Obama is, and I am absolutely convinced, and I would put my reputation as an investigator for the last 28 years on the line on this. I'm absolutely convinced that Obama is not, I'm not even sure Obama knows who he is, and I've said that before. I'm not even sure he knows who he really is, but I do believe that he's a Manchurian candidate. I do not believe that there's any indication, and folks, you can check this out for yourself, that his lineage is what he purports it to be. His parentage, that is, his father, his mother, even his mother. There's questions I've got now at this point, and people say, well, what does it matter? What difference does it make who he is? It makes a lot of difference. And where it comes into is the spirit of darkness. Remember the spirit of darkness y'all felt back in 2012 when he was reelected. The spiritual heaviness that was felt. Well, some people might say, "Oh, you're just being racist or you're just being bigoted." No, it wouldn't matter if it was Obama or if it was, whoever. Okay, the feeling was there, it was palpable. But with Obama in particular, we've got several issues taking place at one time. Who is he? Has he proven himself? Has he provided the documentation as to who he really is, who his parents really are? No. No matter what anyone says, there's been no proof submitted, authenticated proof submitted. And that goes to not only the allegiance to the country, but it also goes to him, his character, and his background. Why is that important? We talked a little bit about that last night. Where has he taken us as a country, as a nation? Is he taking us down the path of righteousness, integrity? A lot of people will tell you yes. I spoke with someone today who told me he's the best president we've ever had.
Were you talking to the dog?
No, the dog knows better.
Okay.
The dog knows better. But when you've got Katy Perry coming into the Special Olympics, folks, I would urge you to really take a good hard look at this. The reason I say this is because I believe from an investigator, from my viewpoint as an investigator, based on the evidence that I've got, open source, primarily open source, is that you've got a ritualistic series of rituals being performed at the White House, satanic rituals. When you've got someone like Katy Perry among the celebrities, but having Obama elevating her above all others, and of course Katy Perry, well known for her dark 2014 Grammy snake-shedding skin appearance, this dark witchy woman that performed when you had people actually ask who were there at the Grammys, did we witness actual witchcraft during Katy Perry's Grammy performance? You've got to wonder, folks, when you have special needs children invited for a White House or at the White House, and then to bring in someone like Katy Perry. Think about that combination for a moment. Just let that sink in for a moment. We know about child sacrifice. We know about how the satanic ritual abuse, and Russ Desdar can talk for days on satanic ritual abuse. But and you might think, well, this is just crazy talk, and really what does it matter? Well, it matters because it's not what we believe, it's what they believe. When I say they, I'm talking about the people who believe in the witchcraft, who summon the demonic, who summon the satanic, who sell their souls to the devil. What did we witness, or what happened at the White House? Was there a satanic ritual that went on? To my understanding, the lights, the chandeliers, glowed blood red for her performance. Of course, that was the design intent. But think about it. And if that's the case, what meaning does that have? Is it just harmless fun, innocuous, oh, you're just making too big of a thing out of it? Or is there something a little bit deeper? Don't forget the anecdotal accounts of Obama. And Joe, I don't recall exactly when it was, when he was before a speech, he went into a room and people heard chanting. Remember that? And he came out a little bit more invigorated or something.
Yeah, the
you remember what I'm talking about?
2008 Democratic National Convention where he was announced to be the nominee. He was reported that he came into the arena drained of energy, couldn't hardly walk, was helped into a room. Valerie Jarrett, his wife, a few others were there. There was some type of ritual that took place. And after that was done, he came out fully energized. And as it was explained to us by somebody who was apparently present there, it was like a different person came out of the room.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, I know how this sounds. I know that this sounds like kooky down here. It really does. But with the dark forces that we see encompassing all of the country, please think about that. Yeah, look, I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying, what Joe's saying, what we're saying. Just consider the demonic, consider the satanic, consider the anti-Christian, anti-biblical aspect of things. It's shown. If you're not convinced there, look at the abortion that he is pushing. Of course, the late stage. I guess you can be aborted up to 3 years old. And of course that's hyperbole. I'm speaking for those who are recording this and taking notes, and there are people doing just that. Of course, I'm exaggerating there. But think about the abortions. Think about the lifting up the perverse away from the conventional and put it all together. Let all of the evidence speak for itself. I'm really concerned, I'm really bothered by this because you've got special needs children. They're vulnerable. And people may say, well, he's doing a good thing for the children. But isn't that always the case? Isn't that always the excuse? Isn't that what we always hear? Exactly what did he do for the children? And I know that people may believe, well, we have other things that we certainly can complain about with him. Sure. But doesn't this strike at the very heart of the darkness? I think it does. There's more going on here, folks, than I believe we know about. And Obama's lineage is part of this, ostensibly his parents, his background. We have somebody in the White House flat out that we really don't know who he is, who that man is. We do know, and I will reinforce this once again as we continue our investigation, you will hear the organization called Subud come up again and again and again. Some of you may have never ever heard of Subud. Well, Subud is a quasi-religious, all-inclusive, all-encompassing kumbaya type of a very loose religious group. And it seems that through investigation of who Obama is, more and more, we run into members of the Subud organization. Loretta Fuddy, for example, she was a director or a elder or whatever you want to call it within Subud, for Subud. I would urge everyone to take a very good hard look at what that organization is, what it represents. You won't find much. And yes, I've seen the Steve Allen clip from 1960, in the early 60s. I've seen that. I do know the background, of course, of their symbol, an interesting symbol by itself. But all of this combined together, along with his absolute unwillingness. I was talking to Joe earlier, and I'm just going to end it with this. You know, we've done a lot of investigations, and those who are taking notes, please take this down as well. We've done investigations, background investigations for board members for Fortune 500 companies. We would require the person being considered for the board position. We would require the authentic or authenticated documents, birth certificate, certificate of live birth, whatever would be required for the state in which that person was born. Social Security card, baptismal certificate, various other certificates, as well as tax returns. I mean, it was a very all-encompassing investigation. And let me tell you something. A background investigation like that didn't take us 2-3 hours. No. It would take us 2 to 3 weeks. We would check everything out. There was no question left unanswered. Oh, and by the way, if someone refused, if the applicant or the person seeking that position refused to provide the documentation, and I'm not talking about a PDF copy, I'm talking about a hard copy, then that person would not become a board member or a member of the executive team of the Fortune 100 company. They were very strict about that. Lastly, you might say, well, wait a minute, that's what the personal attorney of Barack Hussein Obama did, flew to Hawaii, met with Loretta Fuddy, who, by the way, is no longer with us, obtained a copy of his certificate of live birth and returned, showed it to Savannah Guthrie in a news gaggle, which is an informal news conference at the White House, and then scanned it as a PDF file. That's what happened. You might say, well, that's sufficient. I'm telling you right here, right today, it's not. And eligibility is not about where physically he was born, necessarily. Eligibility has everything to do with the constitutional requirements. But even more importantly than that, it goes back to where his allegiance lies. And I think without much argument, the very people who called us crazy, kooks, that doesn't matter. Constitution's irrelevant when it comes to this. Oh, it was already, the question was already asked and answered. No, it wasn't. This case was never heard in a courtroom. People say, well, you know, how many times are you going to take it to court? How many times are you going to have this heard? It was never heard in a court of law. Bottom line, folks, this guy at the helm of this ship known as the United States of America, it's taking us through an ice field like the Titanic, through darkness and through fog, full speed ahead. Like the Titanic, do you think it's an accident? With that, Joe, I'll turn it over to you, and a lot of things to get into.
We have a lot of news to hit on tonight, and now that I'm thinking about it, we've had some issues with Skype and the way we connect to the show, and when Stan calls, he usually calls onto Skype, and you'll probably get the call. So try to add him to the group call if it's possible. If not, we'll have to call him by phone, because you know how we've been getting booted off for trying to add to the calls. So I just wanted to let you be aware of that before he calls and you hit something and it kicks you off. You'll know why. But starting off tonight with news, I'm going to hit an audio clip. We're going to start where what's happening with the Obamacare. We have Ebola news. We have all kinds of news, economic news, border news. But I want to start with the economy. We have new numbers out. We have new numbers out here. $7 trillion debt. The federal debt is up $7 trillion under Obama. Total federal debt of the U.S. government has now increased more than $7 trillion during the slightly more than 5.5 years Barack Obama has been president. This is more than a debt increased under all U.S. presidents from George Washington through Bill Clinton combined. It is more debt than was accumulated in the first 227 years of this nation's existence from 1776 to 2003. The total federal debt first passed the $7 trillion mark on January 15th, 2004, after President George W. Bush had been in office for almost 3 years. When Obama took office on the 20th of January 2009, the federal debt was at $10,600 billion. As the close of business day, July 30th, 2014, it had risen to $17,618,599 million, up almost $7 trillion from Inauguration Day. It is stunning to see, this rise in debt. We're not surprised, but what is surprising is how you hear reports from people like Nancy Pelosi saying, "Oh, Obama has cut the debt in half under his term." We hear many other people saying he's cut his federal spending in half. Well, what they're claiming is that they've cut their own spending. What he spent in the first part of his term, in his first term, they've cut that in half. But what they're not telling you is that the federal debt is not only continuing to increase, it is spiraling out of control. We only have to pay back the interest on the debt. That's the only thing that is required to be paid. So the debt will continue to rise, and it will continue to go out of control. And when we can no longer pay the interest on the debt, if we get to that point before the U.S. dollar crashes as the world's reserve currency, then we'll be in trouble. I do have a news clip here of the debt numbers and the breakdown of this.
And I think this is it's important, Joe. I think that people need to hear this.
All right. Let me see. It looks like it's just finishing uploading now. It's only a minute clip. But here, we're waiting for that. This is another part of the economy. In Florida, like in many other states, we're seeing, here we go. The debt clip is up. I'm going to play this debt clip. Then we're going to switch to what Obamacare is doing to the economy and healthcare premiums.
Very good.
As they just keep getting higher. But here's what is being reported out of CNS News on the Obama debt issue.
Number 43 added $4 trillion by his lonesome, so that we now have over $9 trillion of debt that we are going to have to pay back. $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
But I refuse to leave our children with a debt that they cannot repay. Understand, if we don't take meaningful steps to rein in our debt, it could damage our markets, increase the cost of borrowing, and jeopardize our recovery. Now, the final critical step in winning the future is to make sure we aren't buried under a mountain of debt. Saddled us with more debt and left innocent, hardworking Americans holding the bag. Because the average person thinks raising the debt ceiling must mean that we're running up our debt. It allows us to meet our obligations to future generations without leaving them a mountain of debt. A mountain of debt. A mountain of debt.
That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
So there you have it from the president's own mouth. It's unpatriotic. We're only leaving this burden to our children. Well, yes, we are, and we can see the double talk, the lies, the rhetoric.
Was it a lie?
What?
Okay, was it a lie? Did he intend, for example, did he go into this office with the intent to erase or address the debt? Or was he lying? Was he lying then, or is he lying now? I guess my question is this. Did he have a good intent? We'll never know what was in his heart necessarily. But when he ran on the platform of, well, hey, I'm going to get this debt under control. My question, and I think this is a legitimate question, was once he got into office, was he sat down, did someone sit him down and say, okay, here's the deal. You're not your own man anymore. And not only aren't you your own man, but you're going to do this, this, and this, and, just forget about taking down the debt. That's not going to happen. That's my question, because if you listen to what he was saying initially, and that's why I want you to play that clip, I think we have to ask the question, what happened? And it might sound like a trivial question, but I don't you want to know? Is he his own man? I don't believe that he is his own man, and even if he had an inkling, an intention to perhaps address the debt situation, I believe that he is answerable not just to himself in the office, but to his handlers. And that goes back to who he is and what he is. Just my 2 cents.
Absolutely. I agree. We do not know what his allegiances are, and therefore what has happened since he's been taken office, who is actually the person pulling the strings, or if he is getting what he wants in pulling the strings, which I doubt. From the debt to the Obamacare, here's a report out of Florida from Bay 9 News, how the health care premiums are skyrocketing under Obamacare, and we have new reports of doctors refusing to take patients who have Obamacare that will follow up after this clip.
Thank you. First this morning, get ready for it. If you signed up for Obamacare, it's about to cost you more money. The majority of insurance companies are raising the rates of health plans through the Affordable Care Act. Benny's 9's Jason Lanning is live for us. He's in Tampa, and he's been looking through all the numbers to see just how much more you might be paying come next year. Jason.
Erica, good morning to you. The Affordable Care Act should be affordable. Instead, the state of Florida says it just keeps getting more expensive. And this morning, we are learning about even new rate hikes that will take effect next year for people applying for government-sponsored health care plans. State insurance officials say 14 companies will be selling insurance to Floridians through healthcare.gov in 2015. 11 of them are returning providers, and of those, 8 are posting rates ranging from 11 to 23%. The companies with the biggest rate increases are some of the most popular here in Florida. Florida Blue will raise its Affordable Care Act insurance rates by 17.6% next year. Humana is asking for a rate increase of 14.1%. And Health First Insurance is asking for the biggest rate hike, 23%. There are still big questions about how the rate increases will impact the amount of money Florida families are paying. In a statement, Governor Rick Scott says Obamacare is a bad law that just seems to be getting worse. Florida families are going to be slammed with higher costs. But ACA supporters say the rate increases don't take into account government subsidies that help make insurance more affordable. More than 90% of Floridians that signed up for health care through the government website qualified for some kind of subsidy. Those subsidies could cancel out a majority of the rate increases for eligible families. But here's the big problem. What about those individuals and families that don't qualify for those government subsidies under the Affordable Care Act? There are millions of those in Florida, and as we saw this year, the ACA did contribute to a rise in private health care through individual employers. That will likely be the case next year. Of course, all of it depends on the competitiveness of the market you live in and, of course, the insurance company that provides you that health care coverage. Erica.
All right. So there you have it. Health care costs going up, premiums skyrocketing under the new Obamacare regulations. Also now, this from the Daily Caller, doctors begin to refuse Obamacare patients. Obamacare plans have shrunk payments to physicians so much that some doctors say they will not be able to afford to accept Obamacare coverage. This from NPR. Many of the 8 million signups in Obamacare exchanges nationwide already face more limited choices for physicians and hospitals than those in the private insurance market. But with low physician reimbursement rates, the problem could get even worse. For example,
let me interrupt you here because Dr. Doug Gerard is who you're going to quote. He's a Connecticut internist. He told NPR that a private insurer would pay $100. Medicare would pay about $80. Obamacare, $80 perhaps, which, according to this Dr. Gerard, is unsustainable for his practice. And let me just add this, and then I'll let you go back. I've got to tell you, my personal care physician quit That's right. He quit. He said, I can't do it anymore. It's not because of the money. It's because the electronic paperwork that is now required has become an intolerable burden for physicians on the Obamacare system. They are no longer allowed to direct their nurse or their staff to send orders, prescriptions, or so on. They must do it themselves. And if you have, for example, a 15-minute appointment with your doctor, for example, for, I don't know, whatever, just a quick check of something. Hey, take a look at this, doc. Tell me what you think. Should this be growing out of my face? Whatever. I don't know. But it has now become nearly an hour for the doctor because of the paperwork. This directly from my personal care physician. And I can tell you this, it's a great loss. And he also told me many more to follow.
Yeah, and it goes on to state in the article that due to narrower networks that are now the hallmark of many of Obamacare exchange plans, as one of few options left to insurance companies that allows them to save money by lowering reimbursement rates and covering fewer providers. In healthcare law's first year, 70% of all Obamacare plan networks were either narrow or ultra-narrow, according to analysts from a consulting firm, McKinsey. Either way, it goes on to say if Obamacare coverage continues on its current track, exchange customers could face a lower level of care than those who buy coverage from the private market. Just a big slap in your face, as we were promised the world as it came to healthcare, and we are giving crap, literally. Now on to more serious news. Rape, death, police pursuits continue as illegal immigrants flood Texas County. This article from Breitbart. Death toll continues to climb in, I believe this said, Fairfax County. One of the issues I have with Breitbart is all these pop-ups and ads that pop up. The death toll continues to climb in the Falfurrias Death March region, also known as the Ranchlands and the highways of Brooks County. The toll on illegal immigrants who have died attempting to cross the border and bypass border control checkpoints is now at 44. One woman was found dead this week. A woman reported being raped by fellow travelers earlier in the week, and another woman was seriously injured as she bailed out of or was pushed out of a vehicle she was riding in that was being pursued by a deputy sheriff. A Guatemala woman was found dead on Wednesday along a natural gas pipeline being constructed in the western portion of the county. The illegal immigrant superhighway, as it's called, which provides a direct south to north navigational aid, is surrounded by very soft sand. It creates an extra area that has served to take away many lives when people have been using this corridor to go back and forth, or mainly to go forth into America. But either way, there are lots of graphic images, lots of pictures of people who passed away, and it just shows you the even more of the chaos that's going on here. Not only do you have drug cartels taking advantage of people who are crossing the border, not only do you have mostly gang members coming across, but you have women being raped. You have children being exploited. You have people dying. This is a crisis, not something that people dreamed that they would be able to do one day. And it sickens me to hear what comes out of the mouths of these talking heads in our news centers, because it's completely contrary to what we see in real life. And to move along here, as we have 20 minutes left before...
Wait a second. Don't move along, because I just want to say this. Folks, what you see in the news, what you see in a lot of the websites on the Internet is not the truth. You've got anywhere between 6 to 10% of those crossing the border actually children. Do you realize, Joe, and I happen to see this, what the federal government classifies the age group, what the cutoff is for a dependent, and now listen to me carefully, a dependent
I think I've read this
child. The age is under 30.
Yeah.
30.
Like we talked about the other day with the foster homes. They're taking in adult children, I know it sounds silly to say, but this is their words, or adult illegals that are up to 24 years in age, and they're paying families up to $6,000 to $7,000 a month to take these people in. Adults.
Correct. And the churches now are there are. Be very careful too with what you read, or when you have to be very discerning when you see the news about churches offering assistance. Yes, there are churches offering assistance. This we don't have enough time to get into, but in fact we should do a little bit more on this. The government subcontractor that was hired to do a lot of the support work in camping, putting up these illegal immigrants into camps and to escort them and so on. The individuals behind it, this organization, this organization that I'm referring to, and you all know, you've all seen it referenced by initials, and also related to a Baptist organization, but it's really not. It's not what you think it is. What this is a non-governmental organization that really is, I would say, folks, an unofficial arm of the federal government that is working exclusively for the federal government. Let me just say that. So just keep that in mind, okay? Keep that in mind. MS-13 is actively recruiting right now illegal alien minors at U.S. shelters. We've got just a whole load of trouble. That's already in the news. Homeland Security is doing nothing for this. You've got just numerous things. This is not, and please don't, there was an article at Investors Business Daily. Democrats admit amnesty is for political purposes. In other words, give us your Democrats. They're saying that they're trying to work the numbers so to have more Democrat voters. Now think about that for a second, ladies and gentlemen. If you can control the votes at the Diebold voting machines or whatever voting machines are in use, if you can actually hack into the machines, the electronic machines, flip a number, or corrupt the software and change the vote, do you really think that they need actual physical human beings? I don't think so. W, what's your take on everything?
I just wanted to add one thing. I had a very close friend a couple of years ago who had an incident, lived down in Los Angeles, and he had a very young daughter that was 13 who was being hit on very hard by older Hispanic guys that were in their late teens, early 20s, and discovered during the course of his very exasperated dealings with this whole problem that the age of consent in Mexico is 12 years old. So a lot of these adult children that Joe's referring to are people coming from a culture, a mindset where, hitting on these very young girls, real children, is totally acceptable. And so when you want to talk about a clash of cultures, you're asking for trouble like you can't even imagine at other levels than you can imagine, because the way that the relationships happen in that part of the world, Mexico and further south, is completely different than what we accept or is worthwhile, as worthwhile in our culture, our situation here. I don't think most of your audience thinks that 19, 20, 25-year-old guys hitting on their 12, 13, 14-year-old daughters is a really good idea.
I totally agree with you, and this is absolutely incredible. W, do you think, let me back up for a moment here, because Investors Business Daily today said that the Democrats actually admit this illegal amnesties for political purposes. You know, when you can actually have dead people vote, and when the numbers are already there, you can flip a switch on an electronic voting machine. Do we really need these so-called illegal aliens in here for that purpose? I don't think so. I think people need to look much bigger. What say you?
Well, I agree. I mean, I don't think we're completely out of our minds to, say that we're being attacked by multiple conspiracies. Conspiracy. I'll say the word. It's conspiracy. We are in the midst of some conspiratorial attack for the purposes of dismantling our society, the American society as we know it, as we grew up with it, right before our very eyes. And I don't care if you're only 23 or 24 years old, the country you grew up with won't exist in literally just a handful of years. I don't mean 20 years, I mean 5 or less. And that's not something that is good. That's something that's horrible. And we have to fight this and not accept what is being pushed onto us. For whatever reason, these leaders in Congress have a responsibility to protect the citizenry from attack. That's what they say an oath for. Enemies domestic and foreign. I said it backwards on purpose because right now I'm less concerned about the foreign enemies than I am the domestic. They're inside the gates. Remember when you did the article about the dollar, and at the very tail end of that article, you talk about the enemy breaching the gates and breaching the inner walls. Well, that's where we're at right now. And at the end of the day, this isn't just an attack on our culture, and it's not even just an attack on our lifestyle or the dollar. It is becoming a very physical attack, bringing infected patients here that probably can be treated equally as well. There's no blood serum. There's no treatment regimen that we can't do there that we can do better here. There's no testing that we can't bring samples back here if necessary and do that testing. We're sending experts over there, and yet we're bringing these infected patients. That is a very direct attack on the body politic of the American people and the foreigners coming into the country. That's a very direct attack. The exploitation of our jobs and our technology to other countries that our workers developed and worked and paid their life into, that's an attack on the body politic. And how can we survive all of these various attacks? It's a conspiracy. Somebody is putting money, if you will, ahead of patriotism. But then again, if these people aren't truly American, they're internationalists, they're New World Orderists, then they're really not. America isn't a big deal in their equation. We're under attack inside the country right now by people with a different mindset, a different lifestyle. Legalize marijuana, legalize all the drugs, destroy the country from within. And they just walk in and take over from now. That's what's happening. And even from a God standpoint, what they really want is for God to remove his protection because of our actions, and then God deal with it. Isn't that what we're really doing? We're making it easy for the devil. Doesn't have to do a thing. He just has to sit back and watch. All he has to do is convince our leaders, if you will, to remove the divine protection. And it's a free-for-all. That's where we're at right now. And these people coming in from these other countries, I don't even think it's just the physical illnesses that many of them carry. It's the mental perspectives, their way of valuing things. You're bringing people in that are actually very desperate. And their valuation, their value systems, just because they're desperate people at many levels, that makes them dangerous. I'm sorry, that's the way it is. We're in danger right now. Physical danger, spiritual danger, every kind of danger.
Indeed we are. And W, we're going to cut you loose. Stan Dale's with us, but I got to tell you, we'll get so many emails wanting your July 4th broadcast done. So, somehow book that in your on your schedule. We'll get it done. But thank you for your words of wisdom.
Tell Stan I am looking forward to hearing his presentation. I just can't wait. So I'm with everybody else, waiting with bated breath. But I wanted to throw that one thing on the young kids in. It's just it's very disturbing.
It's
I think
incredible.
People need to put that in the equation. It's a huge threat on families. All right, guys.
All right, buddy. Thank you, my friend.
Bye.
Folks, that was our Intelligence Insider. Now, without any further ado, one of our favorite people, Joe, Mr. Stan Dale is with us, and it worked. I didn't cut anyone off.
Excellent, Stan. It's great to have you back.
I'm not really
show.
here, guys.
Well, you know what, folks? Grab your pencils and paper, and also go to standeo.com. There you will find a link to photographs. Now, this is extremely important. Standeo.com. Just navigate your way to podcast, show images. You'll find some amazing images. You will need to refer to these this evening. While Joe is doing some things here, I will link on our homepage at HomelandSecurityUS.com directly to Stan's page. In other words, it's all going to go to standale.com, but it's under podcast and then show images. And folks, get ready for this because I was excited all day about this. And I can't wait. And folks, you're in for a real treat here because I think this is breaking news. And if we had satellite trucks in the area, they'd be here. They should be here with their satellites up in the sky listening to this broadcast because this is an epic broadcast. Researched by Mr. Stan Dale, and of course backed fully by Holly Dale. What a team they are. And this is all about the cradle of civilization. Mr. Dale, welcome to the program, and welcome back, by the way, from your road trip.
Thank you. It was quite an interesting trip. We drove instead of flying, as you said. These days I hate to fly because of all the hassles you have to go through.
If it's under 1,000 miles, you could probably get there quicker by driving, and I'm serious because of the hassles and my goodness, all the things that you got to go through.
Yeah, I remember you guys got stuck one place here, coming back from a conference here a couple months back, and Holly says, "Well, look, if it's in Florida, a nice place to lecture there." She says, "I'll even drive and you can sleep." Florida's a nice place, so anyway.
Well,
driving it is.
It's a good thing, and I'm going to tell you something. I'd like to see that the airlines have bankrupted for their acquiescence to the Nazi-style TSA type of shakedowns on American citizens, but that's just me. Well, Mr. Dale, we're going to turn it over to you. You have some exciting news, earth-breaking news, epic news, and we'll just let you loose.
All right. Have you told your listeners what we're talking about, or this epic news, or just...
Well, our listeners know, the core listeners know that you have, based on your research, have discovered the actual location of the Garden of Eden, that yes, it does exist. You've actually... substantiated biblical history, or your research has found that the Bible is right, is correct. It's real. It's a real thing. It's a real place.
Okay.
Beyond that, it's up to you.
All right. Well, I suppose if I kind of give you a little bit of background on how I came to sort of discover or stumble upon the location, because even that's an interesting story. About the end of May, I was asked to give a couple of lectures to the prophecy in the news group at a summit, a prophecy summit in Colorado Springs here. And so I said, well, okay, what kind of thing do we talk about? Oh, the stuff you normally talk about. And I thought, well, gee, that's everything. But, okay, UFOs, aliens, flying saucers. And so I started making a list of stuff that I might talk about, and was getting pretty bored with it. And I was opening up old note sheets I had on another project with the Vindicator Scrolls book, and stumbled across notes I'd made after I'd published the book about the Garden of Eden, some extra information I found that, I realized that I had to do more work on the location of Garden of Eden that I had in the Vindicator Scrolls book. It wasn't complete by any means, but the concept was still there. So I got intrigued because I was bored with the other thought of, lecturing on stuff I always talk about. And as I started to dig into this Garden of Eden stuff I'd made notes on, I realized, holy cow, with the new Google Earth Pro, I can fly over these riverbeds if I could just get some of the ocean depths very accurately done. So I just happened to... Hello?
Did we lose you? Okay, you're there.
We're here, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Hold on just a second. I lost my thing. Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Can do. We can hear you. You're fine.
Okay, now I can hear you. Good. Okay. Anyway, so I forget where I was.
The Google Maps and the ability to fly over areas.
And so I needed to find these higher resolution maps, and so of the seabeds, so I could trace ancient riverbeds in the sea as well. And it just so happened that in June, when I started looking, that I found that the Scripps Institute over in California the guys had just finished making an updated high-resolution thing of the Earth's oceans and the bathymetry of it, and also on land. And it was a file that they sent me, a big file, that I could plug into my Google Earth, because Google Earth hadn't gotten the file yet. It was going to be, probably this month that they got it. So I had that advantage immediately that no one else had before. So I plugged that in, and I started looking at rivers that I thought that were correct, and they were, the first part of it. And the first thing I thought I would do was find an easy river for the Garden of Eden. And to me, that was one that of Cush, K-U-S-H in the Bible. In Hebrew, it starts with a K. But in the King James Version, they say Ethiopia. That one of the rivers of Eden went to Ethiopia. And that's because there's a Cushite people there spelled with a C. And these were descendants of Ham. But one of Ham's descendants rebelled. And he went from northeast Africa back across the Saudi Peninsula over into Iraq and Iran. Well, actually, Iran's where he settled. And he built the Tower of Babel over there. Now, because of that, he was a Cushite, but in the civilization that built up around him and all as far down as India, they started spelling the name Cush or Cushim, Cushite, with a Q and a K. So I thought, well, now that's interesting. I wonder if some of those names have persevered in the local communities and areas and regions. If those names are still used, that might help me outline the border of this ancient Kush that nobody could find over in the area of from Turkey all the way down to India. They knew it was there somewhere, but they couldn't find it. So I started looking up names, and I thought, well, gosh, here's 10 right here in Iran, and well, here's another 5 over here in Pakistan. By the time I was through, I had over 130 towns and names with Kosh, Kush, Kish, all that kind of stuff, all through Iran and right into Pakistan, into Afghanistan, and some even in Tajikistan and in India. So I thought, man, I have got it here. Let me just trace around these names. And sure enough, you'll see when I've got the DVD released, you'll see a map of that area with little pins stuck around the edge of where I found all the Kushite names over in the Iran to India area. So I thought, all right, well, this has got to be the land of Cush. Where is the river that goes around the entire land of Cush? Okay, I looked and I found big depressions in the sea that were cut into the seabed, 2 big depressions. One of them went straight up, right angled at the area between India and Pakistan, into the Himalayas. And it either went to the left of the Himalayas or to the right. So I thought, well, okay, let's say if it goes to the left, that'll go up and it'll form a circle around the inside of Iran, and then it would come out, make a circle. It wouldn't come out, it would just circle around inside Iran. So I started looking at the altitudes that the river would have to go to, and I found that didn't work exactly like one would want, but still I could see that India had been shoved up into the Himalayas, and the Himalayas had shoved in return up into northern Iran. Some catastrophic event had shoved the surface of the earth and wrinkled it to make mountains, and so it had raised the altitude, and this would have had to happen after the Garden of Eden tale, if it was correct. So I thought, all right, well, I'll make a circle around here. I found an altitude circle that was still, like 2,000 or 3,000 feet above sea level, but it could have been shoved up, and so I accepted that as possibly this river that went around the ancient land of Cush. Now, when I got that done, I thought, all right, now what's this other chunk taken out of Iran, but just kind of to the left side of where the chunk went into the Himalayas. I'm trying to wave my hands. I guess you can't see that, but to explain that. But this other seabed cut came from the same cut of the river that went around Iran, but it was to the left of it significantly, like say to the west. So I looked at that and I thought, all right, this one here could be the Hiddekel River, the one that went to went up and became the Tigris of today, and went around the land of whatever that is here. I'm just trying to get my notes handy. But anyway, so I'd already gotten 2 rivers now. I had the Gihon, which surrounds the whole land of Cush, and the Hiddekel, which is Tigris, that went around east of Assyria. Now, if you look into the ancient history and where civilizations were, you'll see that Assyria was headquartered around Ashur, A-S-H-U-R, and it's up near the Tigris River today, which flows down from the mountains of Turkey. And so you can see that something had to go east of that if it was the same concept I was using for the Iranian river. And so I traced up through the ridges and mountains of Iran and found that they were folded, and there were sand all up through those folds up toward and above Ashur. And these things are shown in some of the illustrations I have in the full DVD. I'm not supposed to kind of release those DVDs yet, and I haven't made them anyway. But they tell me I'll be getting my copies to sell with my stuff in about 6 weeks. So you're getting early information that's extracted from that, but not as good as having the thing there with all the pictures. Anyway, so now I had traced this Tigris River up through 2 possible pathways through the mountains of Iran on the southwest side, which I allowed for the compression, the pushing up of the mountains. And you can see that if you look in Google Earth, if you go and look at Iran and the mountains of Iran or whatever, and put it in 3D mode and tilt it, you can see where the rivers used to be, and they used to be there because the sand is there. I mean, the sediment that settled there from the ocean, where that Tigris and both the Tigris and Gihon came, the sand settled, and it told me where it had to have been because it was a weak spot in the crust. And so when the folds occurred, it folded up right and made a crease where the river was because it was a mighty river. And you can trace it. You can see it goes up above Ashur and drops back down, joins in where it comes from Turkey now, but the old seabed, riverbed from the sea, comes up there and around and drops down east of Ashur. Okay, then that tells me, okay, look, I've got Gihon, the second river out of Eden, and it goes around the land of Cush with a K, and in Hebrew it is a K, not a C, and not Ethiopia, and that kind of stuff. We found the missing land of Cush with a K, and also to the southwest of it, now we've got the Tigris, or the Hiddekel, and that's two of the rivers now. So I'm thinking, okay, the second one was around Iran. Possibly the second one was somewhere else. Maybe it went to the right of the Himalaya mountains. I said, well, if that was the case, there were Cushites in India. Let's check the ground level there in India. And surprise, surprise, if that thing that was sitting right aimed at the Himalayas, it deviated to the right, and you can see it in the seabed that it did with these new bathymetry maps, it deviated to the right. It would have gone all the way around India and encircled it. But you look at India, what would it encircle? The river would go into the Indus River Valley, around to the base of the Himalayas, all the way around to the southeast, and back in to the sea. And so you say, well, okay, that makes it a bit difficult if it empties into the sea, because it's not really going all the way around India. But I put a little question mark by that and said, okay, I'll get back to that. Now let's go back to the third river. I said, okay, we've gone either from India or Iran in a counterclockwise direction, like Hebrew is written, from right to left, and we go to the third river, which is the Hiddekel, or the Tigris. So I thought, right. Well, now if it follows that whoever wrote this was standing and in some place relative to all this in the Garden of Eden, and he's going from the right to the left, naming the rivers, then the fourth river, which is called Ferat in Hebrew, which is Euphrates, would be to the left of the Tigris somewhere. Well, fair enough. There's a Euphrates River that comes there, and I'm thinking, well, that's interesting, but the Euphrates comes out of the mountains there. It doesn't come out of the sea like the other two going around Iran or India and up into the mountains of Iran to make the Tigris. There's got to be a common point for these. So I studied on that for some time. I thought, gee, well, maybe I'll go to the first river. Maybe that's easier. We'll widen the clock back to the right, go beyond, rotating around beyond India, and there's a land called Havilah, where the gold is, and the gold of Havilah is good, and there's berylium and onyx in Havilah. Well, I'm thinking, to the right of India is the sea. Oh, wait a minute, I said. I've been talking to people for some time about how the Earth has expanded, maybe 20-25% of its former diameter, in a catastrophic surge of diameter, and it split the continents in the time of Peleg, which was 250 years or so after the Great Flood. So I thought, right, let's put the Earth back together like it was, and assume, for the moment, that our archaeologists and geologists are full of baloney, and it's not millions of years for continental drift, that it was catastrophic and sudden, and that the Earth did expand rapidly in that period of time over a few months or years or hundreds of years, whatever it was, but not millions. So I put the Earth back together, and that was a bigger task than I thought it was going to be, but I animated it, and that animation is in the lecture I gave. When I put it all back together, it came almost exactly to like Pangea, what the geologists say was the original landmass of the Earth before it split into the continents, and it also agreed with Owen's paper, W. Owen's paper, about the expanding Earth. Now, he didn't put it in the small time frame. I had to get work from Setterfield's work and from other scientists who were researching the age of the flood or when it occurred, and the exact date of the flood by backdating the shift of our axis. It's at 23.4 degrees now. You can backdate it from what's called the spiral, the hysteresis spiral of the Earth as it slows down and spin, and you can work back from that, and you can see how many years ago it was before the axis was straight and not tilted 23.4 degrees. When we did this, with Satterfield's work and whatever, I did find that their information about the flood put the flood date at 2345 BC, and it wasn't approximately. They said 2345 BC, when you wind the equation back from the decay of the Earth's spin around this unusual axis tilt. So then, studying their work, the astronomer and Barry Satterfield, he's an astronomer too, they together, their information showed that something impacted the Earth back around 2345 BC and caused the Earth to flood. And, it heated up the core of the planet. It was a big thing that hit, and it heated up the core of the planet, forced the hot water of the planet out through fountains of the deep, the Bible calls it. And in Hebrew, you see that these were hot fountains of the deep. They weren't just cool water. These were hot, spewing up all over the planet from the core expansion, from this impact of this large object, which added so much kinetic energy to the planet that it actually slowed down the spin to a degree and caused the Earth's core to weaken or age prematurely and expand. And it took maybe 100, 200 years for this expansion to take place, but it did stretch. So what hit the planet at 2345? I'm now off looking at that instead of, this Hobby Law, because I'm thinking, wow, what would have caused the planet to expand like that and split India off of, northeast Africa and Madagascar off of Africa? What would have caused that? The Chicxulub meteor, they say, they date it millions of years when it hit in the Gulf of Mexico and made the Gulf of Mexico at the Yucatan Peninsula. But if we assume that the Earth was all intact, that all the land masses and continents were all in one thing in Pangea, where this guy was, whoever wrote the Genesis account, it wasn't Moses, it was someone before him. And I've isolated that to some of the patriarchs of the Bible, and they said that I've put it to some of the sons of Shem, possibly Shem, but there's Yakitan, they call it Joktan in English, but it's Yakitan, and his sons, and I've got it down to Peleg and a couple of his sons. Somewhere in that region, whoever wrote the Garden of Eden account was standing over in the west side of Africa, northwest side, just west of Egypt, and pointing to the east. Now, that wasn't Moses, and if you look at the Genesis account, as many have who study this kind of stuff, you see that the structure of the sentences in the Genesis account are almost in 65-line groups, using catch lines between one group of verses and the next. Now, in ancient Babylon, and even in Sumer and Samaria, when they were writing clay tablets, they didn't say page 1, page 2, and that kind of stuff. What they did was they'd write the first clay tablet, which would fit in the palm of your hand, by the way, and they would write that, and the last sentence of whatever they were saying on that clay tablet, if it was a long story, it took 2 clay tablets or more, they would then take the second clay tablet and repeat the last sentence on the first one as the first sentence on the next one. And that was how they said, this is the next clay tablet. Now, that's fraught with possibilities of making error, but still, that's how it was structured, and we see that in the Genesis account. And knowing that, I said, okay, then Moses must have done this out of the Egyptian archives or library there, maybe at Alexandria, I don't know. But he got the information because he was highly placed in the court of Egypt. He may have also gotten it while they were traveling in Saudi Arabia, but somehow he accessed clay tablet data that had been transcribed about the Garden of Eden. And it relates to other things, earlier reports in the Sumerian things, the Gilgamesh epic and some other things about Noah and that kind of stuff. So I thought, all right, I'm going to make this assumption. The Earth was smaller. Everything touched. All the continents were together in Pangea-like style. And whoever was telling this story was telling it from a position that the Garden of Eden was to his east, as the sun rose in the east, of course. And I remembered, wait a minute, this was before the flood. So if it was before the flood, the axis would have been straight up and down, and east would have been in a different place. So I had to get a map, a 3D Earth map in my programs here, and turn it to where east was where it should be. And it went straight across North Africa, just as straight as an arrow, as it should. Okay, so now I've got east in the right place. I've got whoever's telling the story being one of the patriarchs from Shem to one of his grandsons somewhere in there. And, that helps us place the timing of this, and also the flood relates to that. again, I've got a patriarch's map that I will include. I've got the ages of them and when the Pangea breakup and the flood would occur. I've got that marked in this graph to show people. Not all that's on the internet because the other stuff I put on there for you to look at today is part of what I'm going to be talking about in a few minutes about Eden.
Stan, if I can interrupt, I just want to interrupt you just for a second, folks. The link to the Eden lecture images. Now, these are Stan's images on Stan's website. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, where you go to listen to our radio show, it's right at the very top. It's right there for you. You just click on that link, and bam, it'll take you directly to standeo.com, the Eden lecture images. I didn't mean to interrupt Stan, but I thought I would tell people that in case they're digging around for it. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I forget where I was now. God, I'm just teasing. Okay, so these are the steps that I took and how I stumbled upon these things. So, okay, now I've got this kind of tied down. I'm remodeling the Earth to what it was in the beginning. So I thought, well, okay, if the Earth was 20% smaller and it had the same amount of kinetic energy in its spin, how fast was the Earth spinning at that time, and how would that affect gravity and the length of a year and the length of a day? And surprise, surprise, it made gravity go down to under a quarter of what it is now. And I remember reading a paper just that week about how the doctors, archaeologists, could not figure how dinosaurs could support their own weight and walk because of their weight being so massive that their bones couldn't take it and would have cracked and broken. Well, if gravity was 1/4 of what it is now, that would explain how the dinosaurs could walk. Okay, well, that's an interesting side note, so okay, I'll put that down there. And then I said, okay, so if it's spinning faster, conserving momentum, et cetera, allowing for some, 8 to 10% loss of momentum whenever the meteors hit the Earth, that Chicxulub meteor, I found that the length of the day would no longer be 24 hours, but 19 hours. Now, if you do that, then the length of a year will be longer in their days. And so if you divide that by 365, basically what you come up with is that the ages of the patriarchs before the flood have to be downgraded by 20% to match the change in the length of the year. Now, if the length of the year, if Earth's orbit around the sun for some reason changed, then it could change in favor and make it get closer to 365 or 360 days, but there's not evidence of that. So in that case, we're saying that the Earth is, or that the age of the patriarchs is like 80% of what they say. So if someone's 600 years old, he'd really have been 480 of our years. And maybe that's not a great issue with people, but 19-hour day, 450-day year, that is of interest, and it will help us in dating some other things. Anyhow, that's that. And with gravity being less, here's the other thing. With gravity being less by 75%, and you can do that using standard centripetal force equations to balance gravity and the mass of the planet, when you do that, it shows that the oxygen level was different on the planet. Longevity would have been easier, probably because we had a canopy of water vapor and protection from the sun and the ultraviolet as well. And the other thing was that going back to that time with the gravity being reduced, rivers could flow much farther than they do now because of the friction being less. The gravitational force being 1/4 of what it is now, the frictional forces trying to stop the river would have been less, so they could have flowed further. So now then the picture's starting to get interesting. And I say, right. Okay, so if they can go further, and if the continents were all together, then the rivers that went around Iran or around Pakistan, Afghanistan, or around India, and then up the southwest mountain range of Iran to become the Tigris, that would explain how they could reach that far from the same source. There would be enough energy to do that. Okay, but going counterclockwise after the Tigris River there in the Euphrates Valley, how do we explain where the Fırat or Euphrates came from? So it has a headwater up there in Turkey, it looks like. So I poked around up there. I searched over 250,000 miles with Google Earth down at ground level, looking for riverbeds and measuring heights of the ground, point by point by point, trying to see where there were ancient riverbeds in the Saudi Peninsula going somewhere that would join with the Tigris River and the Gihon, which were, to the east of there, the northeast. Couldn't find it. And I was looking at it one day. I was really frustrated. I was about to throw it in the towel, and I looked up in the northern part of Lebanon and up into the southern part of Turkey, and I noticed that this shoving, when that Chicxulub meteor hit the Earth in the Yucatan Peninsula, it sent a shockwave across the planet into the Indian Ocean and shoved India like the skim milk on top of pudding when you're making it. That skim pushed mountains up as wrinkles would be on the pudding surface, pushed the mountains up all the way around to Turkey. And I thought, whoa, let's just put the mountains back down. How do I do that? Again, Google Earth. I went through it. I took slices through all the mountains and the dirt there to see the cross-sectional heights and valleys of all the land in between. And if I stretched it out 65%, and that's not even as much as it probably was, but 65% stretching the continents out to make them flat, it made a flat area south of Turkey, north of the Lebanon, which is a mountain range today, but it was an ancient riverbed then. And sure enough, I found sand there, but the sand went, skipping along to the west and into the Mediterranean. And I thought, whoa, wait a minute, okay. If the Earth is all together again, the Mediterranean Sea wasn't there. It was joined with rivers running around. And I found that the Euphrates is mentioned many times in the Bible as the great river, the river Efrat. And when the ancients used the river in that construct, it was a way of saying the rivers Ferat, the broken pieces. And the broken piece occurred along the entire west coast of Lebanon, Israel, the Gaza Strip, right up to the Sinai Peninsula. And there was a point when everything was all together where the Euphrates came from at least the Sinai Peninsula. So what's at the Sinai Peninsula? Well, just a few miles up from that or west of that, up in Egypt, there is the Nile, which has a great Nile delta, and certainly I could see the patterns and flow from that could have gone straight between Cyprus, which was joined to the area at that time, and in between Cyprus and the west coast of Israel, going up there into the mountains, what are now mountains, but was flat then, and falling down into the valley, the Mesopotamian valley, where we see the Euphrates today. Okay, I said, so was it the Nile River or was it the Red Sea, which was a river at the time? Because both of those have deep grooves cut into the dirt. Both of them exit. In those days, it did where the Suez Canal is now. When it exited, it went into the same spot. Both of them did. The Nile and the Red Sea River, if you wish, went along the coast and up into the mountains, which are now part of Turkey and Syria. So I thought, well, goodness gracious, I don't know about this. All right, I'll trace back from the Nile. That seemed to be the most obvious. And I traced back for days and days trying to find the headwaters of the Nile, the White Nile, not the Blue Nile. And it went flat, like there was a number of areas where it got feeders and contributions from the catchment area in parts of the Sudan and Tanzania, all those areas, they contributed water to the flow of the Nile. And there were so many branches to it, I thought, well, I don't know. I can see where one branch would have gone from up in that area up near the top of the Great East African Rift, which is, Kenya, Ethiopia, Tanzania, and those areas there. And that would have flowed down into Egypt and would have been the river Efrat. But then I thought, well, okay, the riverbed is not as defined as, say, the Red Sea. So let's take the Red Sea path of the Euphrates and come back up toward the Danakil Plains and where the Afar Triangle, it's called, in Ethiopia is. And I found a strong riverbed there coming out of the Great East African Rift, dropping down several thousand feet and forming the Red Sea, digging the grooves that you can see in the Google Earth maps. So I thought, all right, well, where are the headwaters of that Red Sea branch of the Euphrates? So I traced that back up into the Great East African Rift, up into the altitude there where it dropped down, into the Afar Triangle. And I thought, well, now this is promising, because the other two rivers I've found, the Gihon and the Hiddekel, they come along the Arabian coast around Yemen and Oman, that area, over toward the Afar Triangle, and that's where they start, in that same area. So now I had 3 very strong leads for 3 of the rivers. And that would have been, the Euphrates was part of the Red Sea, came up into Ethiopia through the Danica Plains, the Afar Triangle. And the other 2 that came along etched a hole, a big trough in the ocean bed from Iran or India, one of the 2 of those, and from the Tigris coming through the mountains in the northwest of Iran. 3 rivers. Now, I'm really excited because I look at them and I realize for sure whoever was telling this story was naming the rivers off in counterclockwise, just like the Hebrew writing is, right to left. So I had the second, the third, and the fourth river, but the first one, the Havilah, the one that surrounded Havilah, which is called the Pishon. I think I made a mistake earlier when I was mentioning which one around Havilah, but anyway, this was the first river, the hardest one to find. So when I put the earth all back together in that model I was talking about, I looked at India, and I thought, okay, now then, right of India, where the Gihon would have gone around, if it didn't go around Iran, it went around India, I see a riverbed carved out around the area of Madagascar. Well, I thought, well, that's interesting, but there's no headwater for that. I mean, that's just rivers around Madagascar before it separated off of Africa. So then I started to look onto the mainland of Africa, because there was evidence of a river that had come down on the west side of Madagascar and cut a circle out of it. A circle, I said, well, that's a surround river. That's a curved river going out of Africa, hitting Madagascar's coast, traveling a few hundred miles, cutting back up into Africa. So then, and this was probably the hardest one to trace, I traced several thousand miles, well, probably 10 or 15,000 miles before I got it reduced down to about 1,500 miles, to find the Pishon River, which surrounds Havilah, where the gold is, and the gold is good, and bdellium and onyx stone. And to confirm that, I started looking at the region bounded by this Pishon River, looking for what was bdellium and gold and onyx. And in that area, Tanzania, Kenya, and that area there, they have a lot of onyx. And onyx, it was a prize stone. It came in black and white swirls, and came in colors, kind of rich red ruby-type colors with yellow tones. It was kind of warm tones. It came in all kinds of shapes, and they made carved vases out of it and things like that. And they were prized in the ancient days because of the beauty. And gold, well, sure enough, I found gold a little bit in Kenya, a lot in Tanzania, and some looks like a lot, in Madagascar. And then I looked for bdellium. Now, bdellium is, well, it's like a spice. It's a heavy gum that comes off of certain trees. And with that heavy gum, it smells good for maybe 10 years, and it comes off of a particular tree that grows in clusters in Madagascar and in Tanzania. So between the two of them, the river could have gone around Madagascar as well, and included that in the loop because the riverbed is there. So it either hit the west side of Madagascar or included Madagascar, and the onyx, which is today we know where it is. It's mainly in Tanzania. And the bdellium, which is myrrh, frankincense and myrrh like they took to Jesus. Well, bdellium is myrrh. And it's called Commiphora africana, which is African myrrh. And it grows in a deciduous tree, a leafy tree, over the sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of other places, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, all that kind of stuff. And onyx is found in Madagascar, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. I was putting all these things that are found in these countries on a list, seeing which country had all of the above mentioned in the biblical account of the Garden of Eden in Genesis to 10 through 14. And what I found was Tanzania had all those goodies. And the river that I had found that made a loop around Madagascar or around the coast between Madagascar and Africa, whichever way it went, the headwater of those two branches that formed a circle around that land of Tanzania came out of a volcanic field of over 40 volcanoes. And strangely enough, there was a huge riverbed from that same area going all the way down the Great East African Rift to form the other three rivers of the Garden of Eden. They all came to a head at the same place in northern Tanzania in the middle of a huge volcanic field. And I looked at that because I was looking in Google Earth, and I didn't have labels turned or anything, and I thought, okay, well, let's go see exactly, down to the gnat's eyelash, where these things all come from. And I traced it back to a little area that's 20 acres in size, where the river headwaters all came from this geyser of water that shot up out of the land there in Tanzania and shot up like a fountain, huge amounts, and it filled a bowl that formed the water that went down to the Dishon to Havilah, and also it ran down the sides of it, forming a huge set of grooves that made the other three rivers that I've just mentioned. Well, now, I looked at that and I thought, well, okay, if this is where the water came from, then where's the Garden of Eden? And it said water came up out of the land of Eden to water the Garden of Eden in the east of Eden. Okay, now I see the picture. The word that it used for came up out of the ground is related to the description of a tree, which means it comes up and forms branches in the air. And it's like a geyser at Yellowstone Park when it blew up the water like that. It was a huge amount of water. And I did simple calculations on the number of vents I found in there for the geysers to form. There's two groups right there on top of that volcano. And they could put out as much as 5 million gallons of water a second. Now, that's a lot, but...
I'm sorry. I just want to say 5 million gallons a second?
Yeah. And today, 1 million gallons a second flows out of the Mississippi River into the ocean. But the headwater of the Mississippi, for instance, is not at the Mississippi, it's at the Missouri, because the Missouri River system flows into the Mississippi and then into the Gulf of Mexico. Where does the Mississippi River, the Missouri-Mississippi River combo, where does it have its headwater? It's in a little place at Brower Spring, just on the edge of Yellowstone caldera, and it only puts out between 1,500 and 3,000 gallons a second. Yet by the time it cuts a groove in the ground and collects all the rainwater from the catchment area that flows into it, by the time it reaches the Gulf of Mexico, it's 5 million gallons a second. Now, the Congo does 8 million gallons a second, I think, and it starts with a trickle from an ice flow or iceberg type, glacier, up in Peru at the top of a mountain there. And it's a very small stream, but they've recently discovered that very small stream flows down, cuts a path, gets contributing water from the catchment area, and becomes the mighty Congo River. Well, now, if you had as much as 5 million gallons a second coming out of this geysers, it would have overkilled what we needed for those rivers to go the distance and provide the force they did. So even less than that would work from that place. Well, now, I said, okay, let's look at what's available around that water source. And now, if you look onto the show images page I've got there, you'll see on the second row the rivers of Gan Eden. By the way, the Hebrew word for the Garden of Eden is Gan, and it's pronounced as G-A-H-N, Gan Eden, A-D-E-N. And, of course, there is the Gulf of Aden right there at Djibouti in the Far Triangle, which they knew that it was somewhere around there was the Garden of Eden, but they didn't know exactly. But if you click on that picture, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You will see 6 riverbeds And the ones that I preferred are in red and blue and yellow, and those are the preferred beds. It doesn't matter which of these rivers you take, or river beds. They will all end up at the same place, up in Tanzania, at the address that I'm telling you about, where that water source was. Now, if you click onto the third image on the second row on the right, it says Hot Stones of the Gan Eden. And now then you'll see what I first saw from the air, or from satellite on the Google Earth thing. And you'll see lots of volcanoes. Those little yellow pins I've got over there are bunches of volcanoes in that area. It's not all of them, but it's just, the ones that are immediately around the area. And this is important because there are clues in the Bible about what caused, the Garden of Eden to be described as stones of you've walked in the stones of fire, talking to Satan as the king of Tyre. And the reason they say that is because he was described in Ezekiel 28:14 as the anointed cherub that covered the mercy seat, or covered, God's business there. And he was on the holy mountain of God, the mountain of God, and he'd walk up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. And that many volcanoes make stones of fire, believe me. And I'll tell you this in a second. I did find the mountain of God. Even the local tribes, the Maasai and the Datoga, they're called, who've been there for thousands of years, not the Maasai, but the Datoga, they call that mountain right on the edge, on the end of the Garden of Eden complex, the mountain of God. And they say, according to their legends, that God created man in this area, which we're going to look at closer in a second. And after he finished with that, he went up in the sky and didn't come back. Now, Ezekiel 28:16, again talking to Satan, known as the king of Tyre, that you've sinned, and I will cast you as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy you, covering cherub from the midst of the stones of fire. So, however he's going to kill Satan, it's going to be done in this area. This is why the Garden of Eden is another reason why it's important to know it at this point in time. Now, people have said, okay, look, why are you saying the Garden of Eden's there and we can go back? Because we were kicked out, so man could never go back. And so if that is the Garden of Eden, why are people allowed in? Since the time of Jesus, when he paid the price for sin of mankind, we could go back. There was no reason after that for that curse to remain on mankind. And I looked to try to find, another clue, which was the flaming sword that turned in every direction to guard the gateway to Eden, the Garden of Eden. Well, that's not what it said in the old language. When you start digging into it, the cherub has two meanings. One is about a strong, mighty, powerful being, like the covering cherub, which Satan was. And it also, in the ancient languages, very, very ancient, used to mean big, powerful, flaming thing. And this is what they called burning mountains in the old days. Cherubs, volcanoes, are burning mountains. And it said it put the cherubim, plural of that, a bunch of them, on the east side of the Garden of Eden to not guard the pathway so much, but to show and mark the pathway to the Garden of Eden later so you could find it. And this is strange. I mean, when you get back into the Old Hebrew, a lot of things start to make sense. There's a word called lahat in the description of these cherub, and that's a glittering flame. Now, you'll see in that picture I've pointed you to there on the website. On the right side, you'll see pins around Mount Kilimanjaro and the two large volcanoes on the left and right of it, the Mawenzi crater, the Shira crater, and, of course, Kilimanjaro is called the Kibu crater. These were known and still are known as the mountain of light, and Kilimanjaro is, not erupting now, but ancient times it did, and it's 19,000 feet high. It's the signpost, the glittering flame that came from there, the lahat, that came from that area, sparkles, eruptions, whatever, and it marked the area so that you knew to go from there westward and you'd hit the Garden of Eden, which you'll see in that image that I've got there on the website. Now, it's when I told you that it's put there to mark the pathway instead of to guard it, it's, the second I think it's the second preferred use of the word, but these are translations of verbs that are so old that they say we think it meant, but the meaning is not clear since the verb is so old. And the verb in this case here was mythopikot, which means to turn back, to ruin, to turn against. Also, a flaming desolation, to turn back, to keep the way of the tree of life, is how that translates when you put it in the old meanings. So it's telling you, this is a marker. This is a signpost to let you know where it is. And, all right, now, if you're looking at that picture on the Show Images page, now go to the third row, second picture, and click on that, and you will see a close-up of Mount Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro has a lot of gold around it, and it's right there in the middle of what was called Havilah, the mystery Havilah. Today, there's the Kilimanjaro gold mining company. There's jewels and stuff, all kinds of things. Tanzanite is a kind of a bluish purple type gem, and tanzanite was formed by volcanic eruptions of a particular silicate. It fell in globules all out around Kilimanjaro and some of the other little volcanoes there, and it was very uninteresting. It was a dull, kind of brownish-looking rock. Then one day, a prairie fire came through and heated all these dull-looking rocks, and they became beautiful, transparent type, or translucent anyway, blue tanzanite, and became a precious gem after the fire. The prairie fire heated them to a certain temperature, and it outgassed whatever was blocking the light and made them the beautiful gem they are. And all this comes from that area there around Mount Kilimanjaro. And as I say, a lot of gold from there eastward into the coast. And as a side note here, let me tell you, King Solomon had gold mines that he got, like 40,000 tons of gold a year from, every 3 years when the ships came in. And people often said, well, where was the gold mine? It wasn't here in Tanzania, but it was in the part that hooked on to Tanzania, which was Madagascar. And again, in the lecture, I have, images showing you with Google Earth, and some actual footage, I think, as I recall, showing the bay and at the northeast corner of Madagascar. It's a peculiar bay. It's a nice wide bay. Right in the middle of it, something like a pointed, like a fez, but a pointed fez with a little tail on it. And the word that is used to describe Solomon's gold mines, and one of them was Ophir. And in the Arab roots, it could be Ophir, like a turban, looking like a turban in the middle of the beautiful bay there. It also means in Arabic, rich coast. But in Solomon's language, he referred to it as the wedge of Ophir, and the prophets wrote that down as the wedge of Ophir. Now, in the ancient days, before Solomon even, to split large stones, you would cut a small groove deep enough to hold, 8 to 10 inches of wood as a wedge, and he would hammer the wedge into that, knowing that if you could put enough force, to spread the rock apart, it would split where you want it without having to saw it in half. And then they would pour water on that soft wood, and it would swell. And they put a number of these wedges along there to swell and break the stone apart. So as a bit of a joke, but keeping a secret, Solomon referred to his gold mine, his precious one, as Ophir, like a wedge of Ophir, because at Madagascar was the wedge between East Africa and India when everything was together. And water surrounded it, and it was split apart. Now, it didn't cause the split, but that's how you referred to it, as the wedge of Ophir. So then I started looking now, and Madagascar is now being developed by the Chinese and a number of other countries, France, to get gold out of there. And the gold is just like laying on the ground. It is enormous amounts of powder and small nugget gold that have washed down from the mountains in the northeast down into the riverbeds and have settled there. So when Solomon sent for his gold from there, it was probably 450 talents of gold, which would be about 30,000 pounds of gold. He would send these guys over there, and they would go and sift, and pan the gold out, and use gold separating tables and other things they built to separate the gold dust out of the sand. It was just absolutely rich. And they even used descriptions of the gold of Ophir as the dust of the streams of Ophir and the rocks of Ophir, and that is the chunks and the dust of gold in Ophir, and that's one of Solomon's big gold mine sources. And of course, being in the southern part of Tanzania or Madagascar, which is hooked to there, you can see why. All through that belt and over beyond Madagascar into the west coast of India, you'll find gold, and the whole gold mining district of the strong part of it in India is on the west coast, in the it starts with a K anyway. It's a region down there. You can look up the gold in India and see the mines in that whole region of mountains. It was once connected to Madagascar, which was connected once to Tasmania. An interesting chain of events. Anyway, that's a side note on Tanzania. Now, if you're looking at the third row down, is that third row down? Yeah, in the last picture, Ngoro looking southeast. The name of that crater that I saw that was fed by the water that I was telling you about there, springing up out of the northern part of the Garden of Eden complex, fed into a crater. And it's the only crater like this that's still intact in the world. It used to be 19,000-foot tall mountain, a volcano, and it collapsed on itself down into a cavity that was left underneath it and formed this crater, 102 square miles worth of crater floor with water in it and protection, because of the walls around the edge. People had to, or animals or whatever, had to be really persistent to even find out how to get there. That was the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were formed from the red dirt. And you'll see the red dirt in the photo I've got there on the sides of the crater. That was the red dirt that God made Adam, man, from. And if you can ever get there to visit, you'll be able to get a vial of the stuff that made the DNA for Adam, an Adamic man. Now go down to the fourth row now, in the middle, where it says Gan Eden Revealed. Now, that is a short little clip, about a minute. I show you inside the Garden of Eden, and you'll see that we've played the traditional Thus Spake Zarathustra as we come over the rim of the Garden of Eden, and you see the real Garden of Eden where mankind was formed, and it's a world treasure right there in front of your eyes. So there's two forms of it. A short form is a MV4, and then a long form, a .move. And then go down to the next row where you see the Gan Eden from satellite, and click on that. And now then, when we do that, we'll talk more about the, what's happening here? Now let me have it. My internet's gone croaky. Anyway, if you click on that, you'll see a footprint in yellow, it looks like, and that's the outside of the Eden complex, the Gan Eden complex. And that complex is bigger than the actual Garden of Eden, which is right in the center of that. Are you on that page, Doug? Or
yeah, I am, and folks, that happens to be the
image. Getting on there too. You might be a volume issue, Stan, with so many people trying to access it.
Yeah, it might be, because it certainly worked when I was clicking on it a while ago. It's trying to connect. I'm getting a can't connect message at the moment, but I can on the flaming sword picture about 2 rows up. I can get that picture, and I can get the inside the crater. So people must be downloading some big stuff there.
Yeah, and Stan will say this, that picture that you have of the Cradle of Life happens to be the one I selected to put on the front page of our website. So, folks, in the meantime, again, this is all standeo.com, but in the meantime, if you just go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, that picture, that footprint, is right on the front page with a direct link to the show images there. This is fantastic. Stan, let me allow you to rest your voice here. Let's take a very quick break, as we didn't...
The edition of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our very special guest, Stan Deyo, who is back fresh from the Prophecy in the News conference, where he gave a few presentations, one on the Garden of Eden, another on the Gold of Solomon. His website is standeo.com. You can go to our website, HomelandSecurityUS.com, and there you will find the images, show images for tonight, as well as on Stan Deo's site under Show Images to the right of the microphone. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Stan and let you continue from where you left off.
We were discussing, I think, Solomon's gold mines and stuff like that, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Not that it's germane to the Garden of Eden, but I think Solomon, being very wise and having scouts out all over the world at that time, did find a number of places to get gold from. And one of them was called Parvaim. They couldn't find that one, and I explained that in the Solomon lecture, which is a different DVD that's being done after the conference. And I was able to find Parvaim very easily, but the biblical historians scratched their head about it for a long time. And there's another one called Tarshish, closer to him, where the journey only took about 4 months round trip using the high-speed rowing sailing boats of the Phoenician king of Tyre. Also using the same kind of boats, he was able to make a much longer, some 3,000-mile journey to Parvaim, and the round trip there took 6 to 7 months, depending upon the winds and the time of year that they were traveling. Didn't get as much gold from those places. They got other things, but I was able to find all 3 places where Solomon got his gold, and the stuff that he brought in from mines and trading, etc. But he also got probably 150 talents of gold, like about 10,000 pounds of it a year from tributes being paid in from various tribes and small countries around the area. And Solomon wasn't really quite as much of a super being as people make him out of late. The legend of Solomon was enhanced all the way along, like we enhanced the legend of Arturo, the Roman general, and make King Arthur out of him. Still, Solomon did a lot of interesting things, but in the main, he went very bad, went against God, had too many wives, too many concubines, and did just a lot of things, turned against the God of his fathers, which were not right. And but as I say, that's the whole discussion about him and the Antichrist to come and the relationship between Solomon and that's another whole lecture, which I did deliver at the conference. Now, back to the Garden of Eden. If you, I don't know whether you can get that Gan Eden Cradle of Life thing up, but on that page you'll see a yellow footprint-looking outline around the raised volcanic area there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that right? Or 5? 1, 2, 3, 4 peaked volcanoes, and then the collapsed one, which is the Cradle of Life there in the center. There's a kind of brackish water. It's drinkable, but there's water in a kind of a salty lake at underneath the sea of the Cradle of Life. You can just see it on the south end of the garden, and that's where even today there's like 25,000 to 30,000 large mammals inhabiting that crater. You have rhinos, some giraffe, some lions. The lion population has been dying off. It's interesting. He's been there, the lion, since I guess mankind was, after mankind was kicked out and the flood was ended. The lion came in and was kind of like the lion in the wardrobe. He had a pride of a lot of lions there. There were several hundred in the last 300 or 400 years that we know about, and it's dwindled down now to probably less than 50 lions because of various diseases and ticks and things like that they've gotten. They wiped out a bunch of them, but they are there. The flamingos, the pink flamingos, they are there in huge numbers. Elephants, rhinoceros. There's a white and a black rhinoceros in there. Let's see, zebras, water buffalo, Thompson's gazelle, and another type of gazelle. Large herds of these things, and every day, the Maasai who live outside the walls of the Garden of Eden in the Serengeti plain there, they take their herds of cattle in up over the rim and down a little pathway that's been made there to let their cattle graze in the Garden of Eden. at the end of the day, they have to, by law, bring them back out because no one is allowed to live in the Garden of Eden, as it is a protected area, part of the Ngoro Conservancy out of the UNESCO Charter. Yet there are hotels. If you see that orange circle around the cradle of life, around the crater rim, there are hotels built, not skyscraper type things, but 1 or 2 story hotels built around the edge of that. And there will be no more hotels built now by the Tanzanian law. They don't want any more drain on the ecosystem there. So people who go there will have to wait their turn to use the facilities to stay there, or stay in Arusha, some 5 hours by car away. There is a small airstrip, should I say, in the garden there to the left of the Salt Lake-looking thing there. To the left of that, it's a very short little airstrip for single-engine aircraft to get in. And there's also a police station in there to keep people out and keep poachers out of there. And let's see, garden area. Okay. Now, up in the top right-hand part of that, you'll see the water spring. The word water goes over 2 holes, or 2 pits where the water gushed up out of the spring I was telling you about. That it was the headwaters of all 4 rivers. Where you see where it says main reservoir, that one is where part of the flow of these 2 huge springs filled a bowl. It could have been, I don't know, maybe formed by these volcanoes around it, or maybe it was collapsed itself, but it's kind of a depression, a bowl area. And the water stores up there. It reaches a certain height. It flows over and down into the Garden of Eden. And water from that volcano on the left side of the word main flows down into the Garden of Eden as well. And some of that water in the main reservoir goes out where the word reservoir is. It goes out down there, and also part of the flow that goes to Eden flows down to the south of that bowl to form the Pishon River, the 2 lakes of it. Again, when you get on Google Earth, you can see these things have been grooved out, hugely grooved out by the water flows. They weren't small water flows. And above the word spring and water spring, up to the right, you see a little peaked mountain inside the yellow border. And that peaked mountain, people who are downloading the video of the it's out at the bottom of the page where it's showing the flyover of the Garden of Eden, will fly past that in the video I made. And you'll fly past that mountain. It's Oldonyo, which means in English, the mountain of God. And you can actually, this is the only volcano like this in the world. It's a low-temperature volcano at around 500 to 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's called a natron, N-A-T-R-O-N volcano. It is such a low temperature. It's half the temperature of other magma coming out. And it's been erupting, every 4 or 5 years. It erupts. When I say erupts, it oozes magma out and forms big bubbles. And the bubbles cool quickly in the air. They're foamy bubbles. And then they break, shatter like glass when they cool enough. And people have camped up there on the edge of that to film it. National Geographic and all kinds of other people have got film up on top of the mountain of God there. It does tell us that there was a tremendous water supply underneath there, and possibly formed when the 19,000-foot mountain collapsed to form the crater there, Ngoro crater. To the west of there, which you can't see in the picture I've got there, but you can in Google Earth, there's a huge lake, Lake Victoria, which is a part of the water system as well. So this whole area had thermal heat, had huge water reservoirs underneath to form the springs that they just blew up, gushed up to form the rivers and to feed the Garden of Eden. It wasn't too hot. Otherwise it would have cooked them, but certainly it was warmish because that's the pressure underground created the warmth. Anyway, that's the footprint of the Eden complex, and the Garden of Eden is the cradle right in the middle. And if we can get to the picture to the right of that one, it's a map made today by one of the tourist agents there, and it shows you where some of the lodges or motels or hotels are there. The Wildlife Lodge, the Rhino Lodge. There's a petrol or a filling station there, the Ranger Police Station. There's a Crater Lodge. There's a forest called the Larai Forest on the south end. and the two rivers that kind of drain into it now, the Mungi River and what's the other one? It starts with an L. I forget now, but anyway, it starts with an L, and it's coming up out of the volcano up on the top left part of the Eden complex. You'll see the hippopotamus and rhino taking bath in these shallow ponds all over the place. The hippopotamus you want to leave alone. They get pretty cranky and can put a lot of weight on the hoof at you if they get mad. I don't know what the mounds here are next to Lake Magadai, but the mounds, I don't know whether they're graves or what, but before World War I, the Germans had discovered this, and there were two farms there, two German farms. You'll see up near the Munga River, the old German farmhouse. Now, one of those was owned by a German movie actor, movie star. What's his name? Kurt. Gone right over my head. Anyway, he was in the movie with John Wayne, Hatari, which they filmed at his farm there. He owned a farm there for 13 years before he turned it over and left the area. And that was after World War II, of course. And the Germans in World War I turned the property over to, I'll take it back, they didn't either. They got that in the settlement from the British after World War I. They got to keep Kenya and Tanganyika, which is the northern part of Tanzania today. And when they did, come time for Hitler to start training Hitler Youth, they actually had a Hitler Youth Corps training camp outside the Garden of Eden near Arusha at a school. Strange place to have it, but that's part of the history of the area. And the movie Out of Africa, there were a couple scenes shot in there on the rim up in your picture up at the very top on the edge of it there with Robert Redford and Meryl Streep. Beautiful view in the movie, and there was a flyover too, I think, for a flyover of the crater. If you go onto Google Earth again, I'm not a salesman for Google Earth, but it's just such a tremendous resource. People who've gone into the Garden of Eden, called the Ngoro to them, have taken photographs all over that area from all different angles. And Google Earth, if you click photos, when you're looking at the Ngoro crater, it's Ngoro, Ngoro. If you look at that crater with the photos thing on and get down close, you'll see little white squares pop up everywhere, and I mean a lot of them. And that's where people took pictures, the actual GPS location, inside the Garden of Eden, not knowing it was the Garden of Eden, of course. But you can get on there and see photographs in the zillions there that people have taken inside that. It's just a really neat place.
This is incredible, folks. What you're listening to is Stan Dale of standale.com talking about his research and subsequent finds confirming the location, the existence of the Garden of Eden. And I've got to tell you, this is one of the most fascinating things, subjects I can think of, Stan. The amount of work to get to this point. I mean, you breeze through this pretty quickly, but I've got to tell you, I can just hear it and feel it, that you had to spend a lot of time on putting this all together. Even from the, going back to what you said earlier, about the short days, and our intelligence insider just slipped me a note saying that every person, every astronaut, submariner, know that the body's natural cycle is 20 hours or slightly less. So,
really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So the 19 to 20 hour day cycle is imprinted into our DNA.
I'll be darned.
So this is further confirmation.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Well, there's just so many things that this affects, because if we accept that this is a Garden of Eden, which I'm positive, I stake my reputation on this is the Garden of Eden. There's just so many clues that all add up to it and in the right place. If this is the case, then we have to reorganize physics and geophysics, because it meant that catastrophic events happened in the last 6,000 years, not gradualism over millions of years. People have to get back to short-term catastrophic events. Look, well, there's just a lot of cool things that I've discovered. With the reduction of gravity, with the increased spin rate or the shorter days and that kind of stuff, it changes a lot of the chemistry and nuclear physics in the ancient days, how we date and carbon date things. Also, because the speed of light has been diminishing over the last 6,000 years at an incredible rate. Barry Setterfield's work, and you can look up Setterfield, Barry, and his website. He's over here in Washington State, but he and I were friends down in Australia together. He has done a marvelous series of papers on and measured the decay in the speed of light, which, when you plot this curve backwards, it means that radiocarbon-14 dating is all up the spout, does not work. You have to apply this geometric curve to the speed of light, which is much slower now than it used to be. And when you do that, it changes all kinds of things that we use and depend upon as far as, dating ancient events. And a lot of the dating of ancient events, by the way, is where the geologists will refer to an archaeological layer and say, okay, that layer is, they say it's 6,000 years old, therefore we know that our carbon-14 relates to that. And then the archaeologists will turn around and say, well, look, the geologists say that this is a 6,000-year-old thing, and it's circular reasoning between the two of them, and it's not correct. So if we accept this, then the Earth, Pangea, the split and everything has occurred in the last 6,000 years, which has got to make people rethink how secure we really aren't, because the Earth does have massive changes go on. Anyway, there's just so many things. I'm trying to remember them all here that I discovered quite by the grace of the good Lord, actually, but by stumbling through the discovery of Eden. I'll probably think of some more here in a minute and tell you, but that was it.
If I can just kind of recap this, just so it's straight in my mind. At some point before the flood, the flood being in the year 2345 BC, I believe, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We had an Earth that was relatively perpendicular, spinning on its axis in a relatively perpendicular way, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the length of the day was approximately 19 hours. Gravity was a lot less, which therefore accounts for the ability of the dinosaurs to move upright and so on. You've got the difference in the oxygen levels. You have, of course, let me see here, a canopy, a water vapor canopy encircling the Earth. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, it gets busy, doesn't it?
Yeah, and of course, because of the factors I mentioned here, we're talking about the ability of water to flow much faster at that time, and then bam, something hits the Earth, which you're saying perhaps, or with very definite, this Chicxulub meteor that hit the Yucatan.
Right.
Okay, knocking the Earth off of the perpendicular spin to essentially where we're at now, or roughly thereabouts, in creating all of these Earth changes, which separated the continents, and of course now we have the Garden of Eden moving from where it was. When I say moving, I guess I don't know if that's the right word or not, but being moved or pushed or through Earth changes, and also the Earth expanding, the crust of the Earth expanding as well to where it's at right now. And where it's at now is in Tanzania at this very location mapped out on standeo.com. They're showing images there where you have it. And, of course, I left a lot of facts out, but that's kind of the crux of what you're saying. It still exists.
Yeah. And I've been able to solve a number of missing locations for the sons of Shem and the sons of Cush where they ended up settling, because to find Havilah, which is one of the sons of Yakitan, I had to locate it east of where the storyteller was that told about the Garden of Eden, and it ends up being Havilah, Ophir, Sheba, all in the region of Tanzania and Ethiopia and Madagascar. And that solves, a lot of mysteries about where they went. And there's also a rather incredible thing with the Queen of Sheba. In the Semitic languages, if you say Shiva, is that a B or a V? Shiva or Sheba? And the Queen of Sheba was her throne, if you wish, or her capital was in Aksum on the Red Sea coast of Ethiopia, just above the Afar Triangle to the northeast of it. And around her time, the god Shiva, which could have been Sheba, one of the sons of Shem, I think he was, over on the western coast of India, was quite prevalent in an area that would have touched where Somalia and Ethiopia are today when the continents were together. And I think that's why, she was several generations after all this occurred, of course, before the flood. But she would have been like a Hindu and probably worshiping Shiva. And so she was the queen of Sheba to Solomon. And she came to Solomon to speak about his God and his wisdom from his God, comparing it to hers and the wisdom of Sheba, who was actually Sheba, one of the sons or the descendants of Shem. So it all was quite circular. And her bloodline, I show this in the lecture, her bloodline, if you look at the face of the Ethiopian women today, they are not pure, full-blood African. They are a cross between, say, Iranians and Africans, which are found throughout India now. After the Dravidic, invasion came down there from Iran into India. So anyway, all that, the gene pool is being recognized now by the Prime Minister of India, who has spoken recently in Ethiopia saying our countries are connected, our heritage are connected. And he is, he's picked up on the race connection, the gene connection, and the cultures between Ethiopia and India, which I find just another extraordinary thing in finding where Havilah, Ophir, and by the way, Sheba, Queen of Sheba, had their kingdoms, where they came from. Just so many things.
Wow. So many things. Wow. Stan, is there any, and I don't know even how to ask this question, but whether it's current day or previous, the longitude and latitude, any significance there with respect to, the location?
Oh, I don't think so. Look, we've invented, long after these things happened, we've invented latitude and longitude based on the tilt of the Earth and the spin and everything. I know that we built a lot of our base 60 time and compass bearings and stuff on Babylonian Route 60. Like their money system was on the basis of 60. So it may relate to that, but I don't think that there's any. Well, I don't.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I was just curious. I didn't know if there was anything there.
I could be wrong, but I just don't see how that would fit in the time frame. But
okay,
I don't know all the answers. Just
wow.
a few.
Man, I'll tell you, this is incredible.
Well, do you remember a while back here where a woman, a scientist, biologist, developed the mitochondrial Eve theory that, showing that everyone was related to the mitochondrial Eve out of Northeast Africa?
No.
Remember that?
No, I don't. No.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, anyway, I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. I put that graph in the lecture showing where she said the mitochondrial Eve started and showing lines traced by gene pools that she tested genes all over the planet, showing how they spread out like the limbs of a tree out into the rest of the earth. From there, that we all came from that area, tracing that gene. And they've now done it as a mitochondrial atom as well, and matched his type of DNA. to that same area, and the area is within 20 miles of the Garden of Eden. And they have found the oldest hominid bones, which of course they place at millions of years, outside the wall of the Garden of Eden in the Old Denai Museum there, and also in the Omo Valley, which is about 100 miles from there. So all of these things add up. The biblical account, the location of Eden, the mitochondrial Eve, the archaeological proof of the oldest skeletons in the world, all point to this area. There is no question about it. Biblical evidence is agreeing, really, with archaeological evidence. Just the timing of the events, the length of the years and stuff like that, is the only thing at difference here. The locations are the same. They all say the same thing. And when you get that close between science and the Bible, you got to sit up and listen.
So, really, you've single-handedly destroyed anyone who would say the Bible is allegorical or even untrue because of the accounts.
Doug,
wow.
That is true, and I realize that sometime back, when I say sometime back, in the last probably 9 to 10 weeks, it's all I've known and been able to do this research. So it's still new to me, but it strengthened my faith so incredibly. I mean, I believed and prayed, and I still do, but when I realized that I could go and touch and walk across the dirt of Eden, where my genetic ancestor started all this, or it was started by God through him, I was just dumbfounded. I thought, I can fly in there and get within 5 hours by road, and then when I started seeing how many people have been going to this place, not knowing that it was the Garden of Eden, the Travel Bureau, in fact, there's down at the bottom of the page, I've got a show image page, I've got a link to some DVDs. I think we've got about 20 of them left at the moment. I'll have to have them run off another run for us, but it's taken inside the Ngoro crater, inside the Garden of Eden, and he's taking safaris down in there, and of course he's trying to sell safaris, but he says to him within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the DVD, he says, it's almost like the Garden of Eden here. And I'm thinking, duh, wake up, guys. And other travel agencies are saying it's Africa's last Garden of Eden. And I'm thinking, it's not the last, it is the Garden of Eden. It's not the 8th wonder of the world. They're saying it is the wonder of the world. Number one. And, I went to news agencies. I said, Holly typed out press releases for us, sent to every major television station in the area here. We went to Fox, to the religion editor, went to newspapers all around the joint, National Geographic, History Channel, Sci-Fi Channel. I wrote to all of those and sent them that press release she put together. Not a peep, not a word, not even Coast to Coast Radio, who I go to see, do programs with, and they asked me to ring them up anytime I got something new here. It was probably 2 months ago. And I told them I've got something coming. When I told them, I've talked to them, I've emailed copies of stuff to 4 of them, and no reply from them. They are not interested. And so I thought, I give up. I'll tell the people that, are on the Hagmann show, the listeners, here it is, and run with it. I hope you can have better luck with the media, because this is a world-shaking discovery. And so this morning I thought, or yesterday actually, I said, I'm going to take one more step. I'm going to write to the people who make money off of that area, to the hotels, because some of them charge as much as $1,500 a night per person. It's big-time money. There's cheaper versions around there, but they do make money when people come. So I wrote to them, and I said, look, to the board of directors, this will make you money. Tell the people, tell the press what you've got here. I can prove this. If you're interested, get back to me. Well, they were back here this morning. I woke up, and I had a letter back from, email back from them saying, oh, yeah, very interested, and from the board of directors, and so I've sent them in more detail. And it took that to get anybody interested. I had to relate it to money before anybody would pay attention. I'm just astounded.
And that is extremely sad to hear that's the motivation behind this, because, folks, essentially what you're hearing is an exclusive here on this program. I don't want to overstate that, but to me, this is so important, biblically, historically, scientifically, coming from a man that we all respect, Mr. Sandeo, his work, his is exercised with detail. And of course, we don't have to go off the platitudes. We know how good Stan is and how detailed his research is. So, and just to make you feel good here, Stan, I got to tell you, we've got listeners. I just got emails. With a couple of people have questions from the UK. One from the UK, two from Ireland. That's a first. Several from South America, a few from Central America, many from the United States and Canada, all listening live right now, different time zones. We may have all the time zones covered, by the way, just looking at this, I don't know, or at least half of them. But this is fantastic. One person, this comes from Marie, listening in the UK, listening live, wants to know, Stan, is there any... her question is, would you know, would there be anything significant, physically significant, in the Garden of Eden or in this area? For example, we hear about the tree, the tree in the garden. What was the tree, for example? Is that tree,
The tree of life and the tree of knowledge.
Yes.
Tree of knowledge, I suspect if it's there, is buried or locked away where we wouldn't find it. It'd be like, there are legends in the local tribes about some plants you can eat that to heal your body and make it just, renew, which is like life. But in that diagram I was telling you about the mitochondrial Eve, it's like the branches of a tree of life spreading out into the nations. It just spreads out like tree branches. And I often wonder if that was, a play on words that was given to the person that wrote the Genesis account there of the Garden of Eden. But there are trees there which, they do work as far as the Garden of Eden tale. One is called a Revolvia Caphra, and that's a long word for quinine fig tree with 11-inch long leaves that are leathery that you can tie together and make a skirt for yourself to cover your nakedness, and they grow there in the valley or in the crater. So at least that, enough to make fig leaf clothing, is there today. There are a number of trees that are, they're acacia trees, like the acacia wood they made the ark out of, but they're variations of the acacia wood there. There's the singing acacia, which has a fruit that is hollow, and when the wind blows, it makes weird chiming sounds through the tree. And there are flowers during the wet season, between about September to December. Beautiful, fields of flowers and colors in the garden. But it's still a hard place in the summer. And as far as those two missing trees, that I don't know unless we poke around at the south end of the garden that we're going to find. The flood did come and destroy a lot in the area, and then of course it dried out. So, Maria, I'm sorry I can't give you that. That's about the only thing that I can't give you from all the clues.
Fantastic. Ethan from Ireland wants to know. I just shut the email down. I apologize. I'm okay. Here it is, right here. Would like to know, with respect to the resorts, the motels there, this is a destination for what? ? In other words, why would people travel there, I think is what his question would be today. Would it be safaris?
Let me tell you. Let me tell you this. If you see the beauty and the wonder of this being the Garden of Eden, and don't want to go there, there's something wrong with you. I mean, Ethan, me boyo, get a grip on it. This is a great treasure, And on that line, though, Ethan, maybe what you were meaning seriously was, why would anyone go to that part of the world at the moment? Because there are two problems facing visiting that area from the European countries. One is Ebola. It's only one country away. And the other is the terrorist groups, like Hamas and some others that are pressing into Kenya, Sudan, and they have kidnapped people in Sudan, which, if you are up with the news, that's happened over the last few months. So there are health risks and from disease, and then kidnapping or harmful threats from terrorists there. We have investigated trying to form a group of people to pay for mercenaries to accompany guests wanting to go over there together to keep us alive and not captured, thinking if there were enough of us and with armed guards, we might be able to go into the Garden of Eden with machine guns.
Wow.
I mean, we've looked at all kinds of ways to get around the danger in the area. And so failing being able to go ourselves, that's why we're looking around for videos and DVDs that have been made in the area to at least share that with people. And we only have, like I say, about 20 of these that we got or left from the 50 we ordered. And they have to make a runoff at the travel agency before we get any more. But that's the only thing we found so far that's worth a darn, taken in that area. The Atari movie was a sad movie because they were catching animals and animals were getting hurt in it, and it was a pretty mindless safari-type movie. But you did see a lot of the Ngorongoro crater during the movie. If you can overlook the movie plot and everything, then I guess you can see a lot in Atari.
And that was Kurt Mueller, I believe, right?
No. I've got it.
Sorry.
Holly talked to Holly about it all day today, and I can't remember the German's name.
Okay.
But you'd know him if you saw him. John Wayne.
Of course. Yeah. And I remember Atari, and I just there was a series too. Well, it doesn't matter, but
and you remember Mancini's Baby Elephant Walk. I can't do it for you, but that was from that movie as well. Okay. Long time ago. I'll find this for you here just real quickly. Okay. I'm just looking up now. Atari stars on that. Wait a minute. Kurt Mueller as Hardy Kruger? No, Hardy Kruger as Kurt Mueller. Anyway, the star was Hardy Kruger, and he played.
Right. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. I know. All right. Anyway, question answered on that. And
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I'm not sure where to go. Where else to go with this? I mean, so the Earth being the age of the Earth. I mean, you're actually dating the flood, which confirms biblical accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, this to me. Wow. So sorry for being absolutely stunned. I'm looking at this. I can imagine how you were received at the conference.
Yeah. Oh, boy. People were just astounded there. They came up to Holly and I just all the time after that, and we had meals with a lot of people and talked about it, and I just was amazed that they were so in tune. They were convinced, just as I was, almost immediately. And we had a good time during the lecture. We got to have a few laughs. Got to tell them about exploring a cave for Indiana Jones or Vendel Jones over in the Qumran, and how a bat. Okay, how I was in that cave there and a bat dropped on me, and in the dark that can be, you don't know what it is, but whether it's a snake or a bat or a tarantula or what. But anyway, we had a bit of fun laughing about that. This whole thing with the Garden of Eden led to the other lecture, which has a bit of, UFO, alien, deception type stuff in it, but it led me to study Solomon more, trying to find these stupid gold mines and things, which helped me define where Eden was. And what I have found is that in the Bible, where it speaks of the 666, the number of the beast is 666.
Right.
It's the name of a man. In the Bible, there's only one man associated with the number 666, Solomon. And it was for the amount, 666 talents of gold per year. Now, if you look at Solomon, he was a bad dude. He just really went bad, worshiping, gods that weren't our God. It was like witchcraft and occults and baby sacrifice, to Moloch and that kind of stuff. So when it pointed to Solomon and the name of the man, the number and the name of the man is 666. Okay, that tells you, go back and look at who had that. It was Solomon. So I said, right. So the Antichrist could have the name Solomon today. What would the Arabs and the Muslims think about that, I said. So I started looking up what the Muslims think about Solomon, that they call him Suleiman, the great prophet. And the Kabbalah, people who study the Kabbalah, and many of the Arabic legends almost deify Solomon as the Messiah, who they think will return, or at least come in our time. The new leader of the world will be a Suleiman. He used to fly to work in a flying carpet, according to the Arabic legends. That could well have been some kind of a saucer craft. He had control over the demon jinns. Again, that could have been control over fallen ones or demons. One legend, which is quite prevalent in the study of Solomon, is that he ordered 500 jinn that he had control of with a secret ring he'd gotten from the chief of them because he defeated him in something else. And he had 500 jinns that he wanted, they're men. He wanted to send them to the Caucasus Mountains up in Turkey, northern Turkey, to get 500 brides for his favorite guys in Israel. So Solomon sent them off to the Caucasus Mountains to secure brides. And the legend goes, they liked those women up there and did not bring them back to Solomon. In fact, married them and had children, which became the Kurds of today. Wow. They had a mixed bloodline, if that's true. Now, I also said, okay, the Antichrist is going to be a warlike guy. The false prophet is going to be more like the politician Mr. Smooth. Now, the Antichrist would have the name Suleiman. So I thought, well, let's look into, Syria, the Kurds, in that area for anything in the news or on the Internet about a guy named Suleiman. Holy cow, one popped out straight away. Abu Suleiman lived and trained, he's a cleric, a Muslim cleric. He came out of Sydney, Australia 2.5 years ago, moved to Syria, and joined one of the terrorist groups there. There's something New Front, I think it is, but NU something or other, I forget. But he joined them and was down the totem pole. He wasn't leader of them or anything like that. Al-Nusra, that's what it was, Al-Nusra. And about 3 or 4 months ago, the chief of the Al-Nusra was shot dead in his home, and his brother, and they were attacked and killed. And so Abu Suleiman, by definition, moved up the chain of command a bit to where he can be a spokesman for Al-Nusra. He's a smooth-talking guy. If you get on YouTube and look for Abu Suleiman, he has some other things, Sheikh Abu Suleiman in his name, but you can look it up and listen to him and watch him on video. And this guy runs around with guns trying to form a pan-Islamic consortium, not a nation, but a consortium of the Levant countries, Syria, Lebanon, and even Israel. Down that side, they want to form an alliance with Israel with this pan-Islamic consortium. And that's like 10 kings or that kind of stuff in the prophecies. He's trying to form that consortium, and by the gun. And he's going to defend the small people, the Kurds, trying to get them land in a safe place, because right now they have no country. They're in Iran, Iraq, Syria. They're spread all over that area. There's about 38 million of them. So with that small people without a country, he's trying to get power. This guy is trying to do that right now. Now, whether he is the Solomon that's going to be leading, or be the Antichrist, is another issue. I suspect it's like when you look at him, you'll see him and his co-deputies of the Al-Nusra. They all have bushy black beards. They all wear a black scarf on their head, and they're all kind of well-fed. And you look at him and you think, wait a minute, is that him or is that the one standing next to him? You can't tell the difference between them at first glance. And it's like Kirk Douglas in Spartacus, when he's surrounded by the Roman army and he's got pitchforks and his remaining slaves and stuff there trying to fight the Romans, surrounded by it was surrounded with all these weapons. And so the Roman general calls out, okay, give us Spartacus. We don't know who he is. Spartacus, come, and we'll let the rest of them go. So Kirk Douglas stands up finally and says, I'm Spartacus. And then suddenly another guy from the slaves stands up, no, he's not. I'm Spartacus. And another, until they were all standing up saying they were Spartacus. So our new Suleiman, having a lot of lookalikes running around him, if he were shot and head wounded and died and reappeared healthy, whole, and fighting the army, fighting with his army, he may not be the actual Suleiman that we knew to start with. He may be the I am Spartacus type guy, or I am John Galt type guy. And right. So that's another thing to look for in this deception of the head wound, and he comes back miraculously. Now, who will promote him is the false prophet. The false prophet is not going to be so much, shoot it, bang it, and blow it up. He's going to be the businessman, the politician, the smooth talker who's going to write these contracts between various nations. He's going to ratify them. Now, that guy is on the scene at the same time right now. He goes against the God of his fathers, and as I've said many times, I've got my eye on one individual, and believe me, I ask this question, is he the false prophet? And I ask the question, is Abu Suleiman the Antichrist, rather than say they are, because I think these men, in their own right, in their own mind right now, at this point, think they are doing a good thing for the people that they represent. Now, the false prophet that I've got my eye on, he could be, is a man named Nimrod Novik, and he was born in the part of Israel that's part of ancient Assyria. He is an Assyrian by that, if he wishes to claim it. He has accumulated quite a bit of wealth. He's on the governing board of directors of Channel 10 in Jerusalem. He owns shares of property in South America in oil and gas and water rights and gas rights in Egypt. He helped as the senior vice president of the Merhav Corporation under Yossi Maimon's direction, who was former Mossad, to collect billions of dollars worth of assets. And he and Yossi had a falling out about 3 years ago, and he left the company. What he's doing with his money now, I don't know. What he's doing with his power or his influence is he's speaking to organizations like the Truman Peace Foundation here in the States. And if you go on the internet, onto YouTube, and look up Nimrod, N-O-V-I-K, Nimrod Novik, you will see him making that speech. It's a long speech in a kind of a conference-type situation where 2 or 3 of them are speaking from behind a little table. And you will see that he is earnest in what he's trying to do to bring peace into the Middle East. He was instrumental in the drafting of the Oslo Peace Accords that failed in the 90s, which may be resurrected for a 7-year period. That was how the original Oslo Accords were set was for 7 years for a suck it and see period.
Right.
Now, he's very bright. He's extremely bright. He holds a doctorate, at least one, maybe 2. He was trained personally by Henry Kissinger when he was in the States going to college here. So he has a lot of the qualifications necessary for our false prophet. He's 68 going on 69 now. And his parents are long-lived. I mean, they're both alive at 95 and 96. His father was part of the original intelligence group for the Haganah, in 1948, and then a chief of police there and police security for, I forget the name of the group, but in the intelligence community. So Nimrod was raised in the intelligence community, is deeply connected to intelligence gathering services all over the planet. So he has his finger on what he needs to hold leverage and get people to sign contracts and things, and he'll have even more as time passes. So he is on my could this be list for the false prophet, because he's also educated in economics. He's a successful businessman, and he could well use technology that comes out of Technion or out of some other part of the American technology that's been farmed out to make a cashless society where you have to have a chip ID to buy or sell so you can relate to your digital bank account. So he's qualified to do that as well. And if he's not, he's so darn smart that he could be qualified overnight. Now, probably 20 years ago, a friend of mine was at a party with him in Jerusalem, a private party, and this guy, Nimrod, was overheard to say to him and a couple of people around him, after a few drinks, of course. I'm against the Torah, the Bible, and all this holiness BS. I don't believe in all that. So he is definitely going against the God of his fathers. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
And I'm willing to be, I'm happy to be wrong, but I just point these things out to help people focus on what this guy will do to identify himself. Now, he's the man of sin, and I'm not sure whether this is the Antichrist or the false prophet, or both, has to be revealed before the rapture can occur. But it can be 2 seconds after he's revealed that the rapture occurs, at the beginning of the 7-year tribulation. So this is why it's important, I think, to try to understand about who this guy is and look for the signs, the financial signs, the military signs. Gosh, here's another thing. All this stuff fell into my lap while I was researching Garden of Eden. It just one thing after another fell in. Last year, a female reporter for the major news television station in Turkey, I think she's in Istanbul, she wrote an article, and she's a Muslim, and she says, look, I want to see a peaceful coexistence with the Israelis, with the Hebrews. I want them to be able to worship their God like we worship our God. And she says, to that end, I think we should jointly build a new temple for the Israelis on the Temple Mount, and build it as Solomon's temple, which is small because we honor Solomon as the great prophet, and we would help them build the temple of Solomon on the Temple Mount. And in the lecture I gave on that, I showed the footprint of how much space the Temple of Solomon would need, and it's not as much as the Temple of Herod, probably about 40% that size. Anyway, if it's built there, according to Jewish tradition, all of the Arab, Dome of the Rock and the mosque and stuff there, all of it has to be cleared up. You can't build on the same ground with them. But if this is a matter of making peace, to have Israel build that joint temple of Solomon, there's one place along the northern part of the compound of the mountain there, which has got trees and gardens in it, which is near Solomon's porch and near the east gate. And you can build in 2 or 3 locations there facing east. You can build the Temple of Solomon because it has to face east. That's just the way it is with the prerequisite for building a temple. So that could be done. And the fact that the Muslims themselves are saying, let's build a temple together, makes the hair on the back of my neck just stand straight out. It's just, it's amazing. I never thought of something like that. And to have a news reporter like that of her standing in Turkey say this means that there's a groundswell going that way. And that might be part of the negotiations that bring that 7-year, let's try it and see peace agreement between the nations over there. Understand that with the Vatican pressing, to have a joint Islam, Christianity base, or like the Chrislam business, it means that the Vatican is trying to have its influence felt in the Arab world, in the Muslim world. And to that end, what the Vatican is today is the remnant of the Byzantine eastern leg of the Roman Empire that fell. And in Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, there was the east and west leg of the Roman Empire, but both legs would come to power again. Now, most of the Vatican's power is to the west, going to the western leg, but it wants to reopen the eastern leg, which the Ottoman, Muslim Empire overthrew when they overthrew the Byzantine Empire, Constantinople. So the 10 regions that are put together, 10 kings, the 5 feet on each of the legs of the 2 legs of the Roman Empire that we see in prophecy, may be coming to formation where the Pope makes a deal with the leaders of the Muslim nations to accept a joint religion. Now, I find this difficult to believe, but that's what he's trying to do. And they've been trying, the Vatican has since 1975 that I know about, very strongly to bring these 2 religions into a common ground. If they do that, and the Muslims accept a joint religious faith with the Vatican, they will have joined with a mother, son, Ishtar, ISIS, Horus type, religious nation. It would be the 4th superpower or empire to take over Israel or to have control over Israel. 3 have come already. The New Babylonian, and the Egyptians, and the Byzantine Empire, Rome. In fact, Rome brought Emperor Caligula brought the worship of Isis and Horus back into it, and that bled over into what became the Vatican after Rome fell. So all these things point to we're at the false religion, and whether or not the Pope is the false prophet or not, don't know. There's schools of thought on that as well, but I doubt it. But he's still going to be instrumental in the formation of this new consortium of pan-Islamic nations and the Western nations that were part of the Western leg of the Roman Empire.
ISIS is a big part of this, is it not? The fact. Okay. Yeah. Hey, and think about how quickly ISIS has developed. Of course, folks, and of course, who's the biggest supplier of weapons and equipment but the United States? Isn't that interesting? I just find this amazing when you start connecting all of the dots here. Wow. Stan, I want to ask you a real quick question here. Kind of got to go backwards. This from Jeff really wants to know this. We're going to step back here into your original research. Right. When you mentioned, could you explain, Stan, where the dinosaurs fit? Were they coexistent with man, and for what period, or were they a period? Okay.
Whether they were all the time or not, I don't know. But look, I've laid in a dinosaur footprint that is cast in stone. I mean, it's like fossilized in stone, and right next to it is a human footprint of a man, adult man. And that was in Glen Rose, Texas. And when they excavated in the direction that both the feet of the dinosaur and the man were pointed, they went into the riverbank and very carefully scooped off the top of the topsoil to see the rest of the fossilized rock plate, and it continued. The dinosaur and the human footprint continued together through that embankment. And in South America, there are like Mayan, I think it is Mayan artifacts that are showing dinosaurs that we have today, and these are ancient carvings and castings in clay that children even played with, showing humans and dinosaurs together, alive, and working with each other. And they had no way of knowing, how these animals looked. I mean, like the Triceratops and stuff like that, even if they'd seen the bones. So they had representations, and so they saw them in the flesh. So I do think that we coexisted with them. I don't know if that's the Jeff that I talked to at the conference, but there was a Jeff there that I met with Paul McGuire, and he told me to tell you that he would have his network of 27,000 people listening to this show tonight, and that's probably why our servers are a little bit clogged. I forgot to mention that. But anyway.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jeff, if that's the case. God bless you, my friend. It didn't mean to take you off track, but I thought I'd get that in there.
Well, that's an interesting subject. I mean, it's another one of the things that came out of this research and finding Eden, that when you start saying that we coexisted with the dinosaur, I mean, even the flying dinosaurs, what do you call those flying dinosaurs, Holly? What's the name of them?
Terrifying.
Terrifying. No, they're pterodactyls.
Triceratops.
Anyway, pterodactyls.
Yeah.
And they're so heavy, with their bones and their leather wings, that in today's gravity they couldn't fly. But of course, reduced gravity by 75%, and the air being perhaps a little bit thicker, I'm not sure, it would have allowed them to fly with ease. And there's just so many little things that add up. And I think that they were contemporary up until, probably 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, whenever the Mayans were, they were still alive in the South American. Oh, and here's another thing. I told you about Joktan, Joktan in the Bible. It's part of, the descendants of Shem. Joktan in Hebrew is Yakitan. And when I traced where he lived on the west of northwest Africa, offshore of that, over onto what was part of Shem territory wrapped around in Pangaea at that time. It touched his territory was the Yucatan Peninsula, the Yucatan Peninsula. Do you get it? They don't even know where the name came from. And that tells us that, the earth was all together at that time, and Yucatan settled there as part of Shem's territory, which ran through the middle line of Pangaea at the time. And if you ask them, about the Mayan origin of that, they don't know exactly, where the name came from. But it's Yucatan, and I'm telling you that's where they got the name, was from their ancestor, Yucatan.
Wow. It's all coming together. And
look at the Mayan pyramids. Mayan pyramids. Okay, Yucatan lived right on the edge. It was connected to North Africa, which, of course, where you had the pyramid builders from the sons of Cush. And the technology was right there. So, and then it appears over in South America or Central America there in Yucatan Peninsula. And they say, well, how is that possible? They were separated by a great ocean. Well, gee, maybe they were there before the split, and I don't know. They survived the flood, through Noah. They were descended from Noah, and they were there on the landmass when it was connected, and then when it split, it separated the Mayan Yucatan Peninsula from North Africa. And if you put the soil maps together and the coastal regions together, you'll see that the Yucatan is snuggled between Florida and Georgia and let's see, the gateway to the Mediterranean Sea, where the Pillars of Hercules are there. The Rock of Gibraltar, in that area there, and it touched the coast there. Anyway, there's so many things.
This is fascinating, Stan. Now, you're going to have your DVD presentation come out of Pikes Peak, correct?
Yeah, I talked with them today, and they sent me some early release things. That's where I got some of the photos of me on the website there. I just pulled a couple of stills off of that. But they tell me about 5 to 6 weeks. It should all be done. It really depends on what editing is necessary and, inserting shots of better resolution than what you get off the screen and stuff like that. So they're working on it, and I'm working on a CD-ROM right now. Not a DVD, a CD-ROM. Because in the lecture, I couldn't use any of my images from the Garden of Eden from Google Earth Pro because of the copyright issues. And it wasn't them being nasty or anything. It's just that they have so many agencies supplying data to their photo files that they can't give anyone permission to use someone else's images.
Right.
Like NASA, NSA, all kinds of people, NASA. And so, as a result, what I can do is put what's called a KMZ files into a CD-ROM, and people can plug that into their Google Earth Pro, and I can put all the lines, all the rivers, the flight paths, the flyovers, all that kind of stuff. I can put it in those little links, and you can link then to Google Earth Pro, and I've not violated the copyright by selling you a CD-ROM with all that stuff on it, because I'm not selling you anything but a link to punch it in and fly over Eden and fly over the rivers and do area calculations and lengths of river, calculate everything, and see some beautiful stuff and photos that other people have taken.
It's amazing. Stan, we've reached the end of the program.
Fantastic. It's been.
Yeah. This is incredible. Folks, StanDeo.com. That's StanDeo.com. We are out of time. Stan, thank you so very much.
If any of your listeners there, guys, if any of your listeners have connections to media, like press that would be really interested, tell them to get in touch with us, because I've tried everything I know.
Will do.
Absolutely.
All righty.
All right. God bless, my friend.
God bless you. Bye-bye now.
Wow, folks, that'll do it for us tonight. That was Stan Deo from StanDeo.com. What an incredible presentation. And I'll tell you what, CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, contact Stan Deo. Because I got to tell you, you won't get this anywhere else. Folks, until tomorrow, God bless.
We'll have Chuck Baldwin on tomorrow, so don't miss it. Have a great night, everyone.